welcome back to another FPL deadline stream. We are around 2 hours away from the deadline, and I'm going to answer as many questions and comments as possible to cover everything you need to know ahead of the Game Week 3 deadline. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll jump straight into it, and a massive shout out goes to all subscribers. We just hit 19,000, and the next aim, naturally, is to get to 20,000. So let's keep on pushing towards new goals, and also in terms of the like button and all of that, be sure to smash the like button of this video, share this video around with those that love FPL and UCL fantasy. But let's get straight into your queries and go through everything that needs to be covered. So welcome to EG Ryan. Hello, already made 2 free transfers. Is it worth taking a -4 to get rid of Gabriel for a C defender or just anybody? I wouldn't take a -4 hit for that. I know Gabriel's been very frustrating and he's still not nailed on in Game Week 3 despite Tomiyasu's suspension and Timber's injury. But I don't think it's worth a -4 hit because, you know, you look at Stones or any other Man City defender, more likely Gavardiol, Ake, and anybody else really like Ruben Dias, their ceiling is 6 or 7 points. So even if they did keep a clean sheet, it's just in most cases not worth that -4 hit this week at least. Welcome Oramara, you put your team there. So I have 2 free transfers. I don't know who to transfer out. I can understand why. Because, you know, there's some good players. Even Rashford has been disappointing. He's got a great fixture this week, and you'd probably want to sell him in Game Week 4. I would be looking to sell Shaw, though. He's got a injury, and he could be out for a few weeks, so he's a definite sell. And the other one I'd probably point towards there, Omara, is Edouard. I don't like Eze too much either because of the fixtures, but he is a much better option than Edouard, in my opinion. So I think Shaw and Edouard will be the two to highlight there. Welcome to Bill, good day. Please help, what should I do? Gabriel out for Van der Ven or Bruno Rashford out for Foden? I'd rather do Bruno Rashford out for Foden, but I wouldn't do that this week. I know it might not be too much help there, but that's my genuine opinion. As bad as Gabriel has been so far as a fantasy asset, I don't really trust Spurs to keep clean sheets, and Van der Ven will probably not get that many. Maybe I'll be wrong about this, but not too many goal contributions, and in terms of clean sheets, I just don't really see it for Spurs compared to Arsenal. So if I had to pick, it would be Bruno or Rashford out for Foden, but that's something I would mainly look towards Game Week 4, not this week. Welcome, Daniel. First 11. Should I put Gabriel or Joao Pedro? It's a difficult one because De Zerbi said today that Ferguson will start, and that already eliminates or reduces the chances of Joao Pedro starting. And I think Gabriel will start in Game Week 3, but if they were both to start, you would give the edge to Joao Pedro as an attacker, and Brighton have scored 8 goals so far this season. But if I had to pick, it probably would be Gabriel just to be on the safe side because I personally believe he will start. Welcome, Mbumo in for Martinelli or Bruno on a free. It's a difficult one this week. I wouldn't sell Martinelli or Bruno in Game Week 3. What I would personally do is sell Bruno, but in Game Week 4. So that would be my answer. In terms of this week, I wouldn't look to sell either. Welcome, Cylinder as well. Hey, Dylan got 2 free transfers and 1 million in the bank. Planning on using 1. Should I sell Pickford to Edison and have 0 million in the bank, or to Flecken and have 0.5 million? Well, to be quite frank, Edison will keep more clean sheets than Flecken, but I also think Flecken will get more saves and bonus points, and it could be very close in the end, and Flecken is 1 million cheaper. So it's a difficult one, I think, but I personally prefer Flecken long term. That money in the bank could be very useful. I don't think Edison's a bad acquisition, though. I'm warming more up to him these days, but I still don't see him getting many saves or bonus points, that's for sure. So yeah, we've got a lot of questions at the moment, so I'll try to catch up. Yeah, Jesus, I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. Cylindra says, or the other option is cash to any City defender / Henry and bench Saliba for one of them. Yeah, I can see your dilemma there. It's a tricky one. There's not a clear standout this week. I think cash to a City defender is my favourite, but I wouldn't be too keen on benching Saliba. I'm not that confident of an Arsenal clean sheet, but I still think he's one of the better defenders to start in Game Week 3. Canal says, should I start Maddison? Do you think he will start? I believe he will start, and actually that's going to be a bit of a segue to what Postecoglou said in his press conference today. So he said Maddison trained today unrestricted. We'll see how he holds up, but at the moment he will be available. Now, that doesn't mean he's definitely going to be starting or that he's going to be in the squad for sure, but things are looking positive today because if you look at Thursday, he wasn't pictured in training. Things have changed on Friday, and I personally believe he will start based on the news, and Maddison himself was very optimistic about his injury, and the protective boot was only a precaution, so I'd be fairly optimistic. That doesn't mean I'm right and that Maddison will definitely start, so take what I say and even what the manager says with a pinch of salt. Sanchez or Johnston? I'm struggling to pick a keeper, 2 transfers and no problems in my team elsewhere. I prefer Sanchez simply for the fixtures. I'm not a big fan of doubling up on Chelsea defensively, and I think Johnston's decent for saves, maybe even bonus points, and Palace are very solid defensively, perhaps even better than Chelsea, which sounds a bit crazy, but because of the fixtures, I probably would go for Robert Sanchez. Akash says, hi Dylan, great to be here today. Thank you very much, and likewise. Dexter says, hello Dylan, I've got an issue where I've wildcarded but don't know whether to go for Foden, Jackson, or Alvarez Sterling, or Alvarez Foden. It's a very, good question you raised there, and this is maybe the problem with wildcarding early, because you're going to be more unsure about certain things because we only have 2 weeks worth of data this season. Now, that doesn't mean your wildcard might not work out in the end. I think it still could. In terms of those 3 duos, I probably would go for the Foden-Jackson one, but really close call. I think Sterling's a great shout, and I think in terms of the double Man City, obviously a lot of, you've got a high ceiling there, and you could gain a lot from that decision, but you also could suffer from Pep Roulette, and I'd be very cautious about going for 2 or technically 3 Man City attackers with Haaland included. So I think the best duo is Foden and Jackson. New game, new excitement. Yep, I'd say so. I'm actually a bit more excited this time round. I look at my team, I'm a bit more optimistic about my prospects, so I think that's quite accurate. Hi Dylan, play Colwell or Henry this week? Good question. I probably would go for Colwell. I think Henry has a high ceiling, more assist potential, of course, even bonus points, but I'm looking at the fixture and the higher chance of a clean sheet, and I'd still give the edge to Chelsea. Hopefully Watkins can compete with Jackson this game week. I think he certainly can, even with the fixture being a bit tougher. I still think Watkins could be fantastic this week, off the back of a hat-trick in midweek against Hibernian, so I think he could be a really good shout. Daryl says, hello Dylan, should I sell Watkins for Jackson? My answer is no. It could be a question of timing as well. Maybe in Game Week 4 that could be a good move, but in Game Week 3, no chance I would suggest that myself. And who to bring in for Gabriel? Well, apart from Chilwell and Estupinian, who are 2 of the standouts, I would say Saliba or a Man City defender like a Kanji/Gavardio. So I think that's what I'd go for. So let me know what you're looking to do. Start Areola or Turner? Good question. Probably Turner. I think Areola might have a higher ceiling, but I'm looking at the higher chance of a clean sheet or conceding fewer goals, and I think Turner has probably a better chance, which sounds a bit crazy. Ultimately, I think both will concede. Welcome, Bilal. Good to see you. Are you saving a transfer this week? No, because, well, that's not the right answer. I am saving a transfer, but I'm not burning one, which I have been asked in recent videos, because I did make a transfer in Game Week 2. So my plan is to roll and have 2 free transfers in Game Week 4. Should we get rid of Gabriel? It's a good question, because even if he starts this week, which I believe he will, it doesn't look like he's as nailed as he used to be under Arteta. So I think it's still worth selling him to a Saliba or a Man City defender. Of course, Estupinian and Chilwell are 2 standouts too. And I think going to any one of those 4 defenders is certainly worth it. Apart from that, I'd be a bit more cautious. I've seen some people saying Gabriel to Udogie or Van de Ven. I'm not as keen on that move because I don't trust Spurs defensively. Salah or Maddison to Foden for a -4. It's a tricky one. My personal opinion is to not do that for a -4. That's just my gut feeling. But if I had to sell one of them, it would be Salah, just because he's so expensive. Yes, he's still consistent, but he's not really offering enough of a high ceiling or a captaincy choice most weeks, and the fixtures are pretty mixed bag for me to really justify his inclusion in your squad. And with those extra funds, you can do so much else with the rest of your squad. Start Akanji or Cash? Akanji. Maddison and Gabriel to Foden and Henry. Good transfers. I have nothing, against it per se, but I actually think Maddison and Gabriel could start this week, particularly Gabriel. Yeah, Jesus is fit to play, confirmed by Mikel Arteta. And let's actually now go back to my team. So I had the news about Maddison on screen for a while. For any of you, kind of thinking about that decision. Start Maddison or Eze, I would go for Maddison. I've managed to get 61 points. Thanks for your suggestions, man. Well, I appreciate it, but ultimately it is down to you what you end up doing. But 61 points in Game Week 3, or in Game Week 2, very good score. Welcome, Sangana. Start Maddison or Udogie. I'd always favour the attacker. I know he's a injury risk. He might not even start the game and maybe come on for 1-pointer. But I don't see Spurs keeping a clean sheet against the pretty attacking Bournemouth side. And I think Maddison could do extremely well if he gets the nod in the starting 11. So I'd go for Maddison. Is it worth it for a -4 to Foden? It's always a tricky one with Foden because he could be benched at any moment and it's always going to be a risk. But I do like Foden still. You know, I have to say I'm warming up to him, and I would even consider him in Gameweek 4 for my own team. Would I sell Maddison to Foden for a -4? I probably wouldn't, to be fair. And is Watkins to Jackson worth it? Not this week. Should I keep Salah or should I transfer him out? I probably would sell him. I like Salah a lot, and I think around game week 8, 9, 10, he's got some really good fixtures, so that's the time to maybe bring him back in. But looking at the upcoming fixtures, I just don't see the ceiling being high enough, not enough captaincy choices available in those game weeks for him to justify that 12.5 million price tag. So I personally would sell him. Who to? I think in Mbumo, I know he's half the price pretty much, but I'd go to him. And even though I'm not backing Brentford that much to score 2 free goals against Palace, I just think it's a long-term acquisition for your team. Martinez or Flecken? Bear in mind, Martinez is a bit of a doubt for this weekend. I'll try to get the latest, the exact quotes about him, but I don't think he trained, so he is a big risk for Game Week 3. So as a result, I probably would go for Flecken. If it wasn't for that, it would be much closer, of course. Raphael says, already took a -4. Take another hit to change Watkins to Jackson. In my opinion, is simply not worth it. Jackson has a better fixture, but Watkins just came off the back of a hat-trick in midweek. He's got 2 assists in 2 Premier League games so far. I certainly wouldn't do that for an extra hit. Welcome, Soldier Boy. It's always a pleasure. It's good to see you back here again. I'm just quickly checking Twitter to get the official quotes that I saw earlier. So let me just get the Martinez one. So yeah, he did not train today, and the decision will be made on Saturday. So I don't have an exact quote, but that is the update that I saw earlier today. Opinions on Buffon as a 4.5 million rotation goalkeeper. On Buffon, I'm not sure what you're trying to say there. Replacement for sure. Kind of similar to what I said earlier for people looking to sell Gabriel. I'd be looking at Estupinian, Chilwell, Saliba and a Man City defender. Because of fixtures, I'd probably put Estupinian lower down in that list, and I would prioritise Chilwell and a Man City defender. So that's what I'd look to do. Which Man City defender, you may ask? Probably a Kanji or the Croatian Gavardiol. What do you think of Pedro Porro? He's the most exciting Spurs pick, but I also don't think he's the most nailed on. And I don't see Spurs playing both Udogie and Pedro Porro on a regular basis because they need someone maybe a bit more defensively solid like a Ben Davis. But I like him the most in terms of attacking threat from the Spurs defenders. However, I don't trust them to keep enough clean sheets for me to justify that inclusion. Hi Dylan, Gameweek dilemmas are back. They certainly are, that is for sure. Sam Garner says, which one player do I bench out of Saka, Rashford, Foden, and Mbumo, Mitoma, Jackson, Haaland, or Watkins? Really tough call. If I had to pick, it might sound crazy because of the form on penalties, but I actually might bench Mbumo from that list. Of course, let me know if you disagree. I think long-term he's one of the best options there, but because of the fixture and how I think the games will go, I'd probably bench Mbumo. Israel says, hi, who to bench, Maddison, Udogie, or Saliba? Udogie. Welcome, Bestie. Hey, Dylan, thoughts on Salah and João Pedro to Foden and Jackson from -4? I think it's a good set of transfers. If João Pedro starts, you might be a bit worried about, a potential backfire this week. But ultimately, I think Foden and Jackson is a good set of transfers, and I'd probably do it for a -4. If Maddison starts, would you start him over Eze or João Pedro? I probably would start him over Eze. Overall, I think Eze is better than João Pedro, but assuming João Pedro starts, and he's got a decent chance despite Ferguson getting the nod this week for sure, yeah, I'd probably go for Eze on the bench. Do I go for a City or Arsenal defender for sure? Really good question. So if you look at fixtures and who do you think will keep more clean sheets, I think Man City. The problem there is rotation. And I know Arteta just benched Gabriel, who was the most nailed-on defender in the game, arguably, last season. So it is a really tricky question. I think Saliba will probably score the most points of any Arsenal Man City defender. But looking at the next 5 to 10 game weeks, I'm looking at Kanji and Gavardiol, and I think they're the best option. So I would go for a Man City defender. First one on the bench, Gabriel or Eze? Gabriel. He actually scored in both games against Fulham last season, and I think in the last 2 Premier League campaigns, he is the highest scoring defender. Rashford for Foden? Not this week. I'd do that in Game Week 4. Bolu says, attack is Haaland, Jackson, Alvarez. Midfield is Saka, Odegaard, and Mbumo. Mitoma. Bruno's on my bench. Do I keep him on my bench or drop one of my attackers or midfielders for him? I'm sorry, but I wouldn't bench Bruno Fernandes this week, and you've got a really stacked squad, and this is my issue with having 3 attackers and 5 midfielders. You always are going to have these kind of benching headaches. If I had to bench one, it probably would be Mbumo, but it does sound crazy because of his form. He's on penalties, and I could be completely wrong about it, I do admit. And ultimately, it could be a bit of a lottery who you end up benching and getting it completely right. Who do you think will start between Joao Pedro or Gabriel? Gabriel for sure. I'm a bit more mixed bag on Joao Pedro. So Enciso is out with an injury. It could be 1 to 3 months. But Ferguson is confirmed to start by De Zerbi in the game this weekend. So Joao Pedro could still start as an attacking midfielder just behind, and then you've got Mitoma and March on the wings. I think that could be the setup, but Joao Pedro is by no means a guaranteed starter in Game Week 3. I think if Joao Pedro starts, he's a better option than Gabriel this week, but ultimately, because of safety, and that does sound a bit crazy because of Gabriel's situation, I probably would go for him. Salah to Foden. I actually probably would do it. It sounds crazy because Salah is still a better option. He's more nailed on. Foden could still be rotated, but because of fixtures, price, and value, I probably would go for Foden. Welcome, Car. Good to see you. Eze to which midfielder? Already have Saka, Rashford, and Mbumo, Foden. Good question. You might be looking at bright midfielders and saying the fixtures turn soon, I'm a bit late and I don't want to bring them in. That's fair enough, but I still think Mitoma or March is worth your consideration at the very least. Maddison as well, of course, is an injury concern, and he might not even start the game this weekend, but he will be back very soon, whether it's this weekend or the week after. So I still would look at one of those, Mitoma, March or Maddison, but one really good differential for you who has been impressive, hasn't got a return yet, is Raheem Sterling if you want to really target fixtures. So it just depends what type of manager you are. Let me know what kind of way you're leaning towards. My personal recommendation would still be either Mitoma or Maddison. Akash says, I have Saka, Maddison, Diaby, Bruno and Mbumo. Who to bench? Probably Diaby. I like Diaby a lot, but even in the 5-0 victory in midweek, no returns, and also in Game Week 2, somehow managed to skip a return there as well. I think he's a quality player, but based on the fixture, I probably would bench him. Saliba, Estupiñán, Cash, Ruben Dias, and Gusto. Who to start? Saliba, Estupiñán, and I probably would go for Ruben Dias. So if you're starting a back three, that's how I would go. I know Gusto's playing Luton Town, but I would prioritise the other 3 defenders over him. If it was Chilwell, different story, of course. Gusto's not too bad for bonus points, it seems, but that's only a 1-game sample. Welcome, Raid. I have 2 free transfers and happy with midfielders. I have Joao Pedro and Watkins. I was thinking of changing Pedro to Jackson, but can't afford it. Any thoughts? I understand your dilemma. I'm not sure which midfielders you have exactly, because if you had Salah, for example, that would be an easy downgrade in my opinion, or even a Bruno Fernandes despite facing Nottingham Forest this week. So yeah, I think Joao Pedro to Jackson is the best move, but because you can't afford it, unfortunately, it might mean downgrading someone else, and I don't think it's worth selling Watkins this week. And I think you've got the right idea selling Joao Pedro, but it's all a question of funds. Like I said, if you've got Salah or Bruno Fernandes, I probably would take the plunge and sell one of them to get those funds you need. Out of Mbumo, March and Watkins, which 2 to start? Probably March and Watkins for me. Pickford to Sanchez, Flecken, or Watkins to Jackson, says JR. Great question. I would keep Watkins this week, so my answer would be Pickford to Flecken still for me. If you've got Rico Henry, though, I wouldn't double up on Brentford defensively, and as a result, I'd rather double up on the Blues Chelsea there. So it really just depends on your team situation, but Flecken is my preferred goalkeeper and transfer there. What do you think about Son? They do have 3 great games ahead, and Heung-min Son was a quality player in the past, and he's still got that potential to have a massive haul. However, I just don't think he's worth 9 million. You've got Rashford at the same price, who I think will come good. You've got Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, Sterling as well, I think could be better value. Maddison is the best Spurs asset at the moment. So I don't think Son is a really bad pick, but because of how expensive he is, relatively speaking, I probably wouldn't go there. Saliba, Estupiñán, Cash, Ruben Dias, we have covered that, Stefan, so hopefully you got that. Let me know. Take out Bruno. Ideally not. I wouldn't do it this week, but in Game Week 4. That is my plan for my own team situation. Transfer Shaw for a -4. There's very few defenders I would take a hit for this week. Chilwell's being one of them, but I probably wouldn't take a -4 hit because you might have a decent option on your bench and you don't need to take that hit. Hi, thoughts on Foden and Jackson for Salah and Pedro? Good set of transfers. I think Salah and Pedro could do well this week if Salah will start, but it's a question of Joao Pedro starting. But I probably would go ahead with those transfers, and yeah, I think it's good. Start 2 of Pedro, Diaby, Mitoma. Mitoma, and I know Diaby's going to start, or at least I'm more confident of him starting over Joao Pedro. Yeah, it's a really tricky one. Mitoma for sure, and then it's a 50-50 between the other two, and I'd personally go for Joao Pedro. I personally think he'll start, but I could be wrong. I have Martinelli, Saka, Bruno, Rashford, and Bumo. Should I sell one of them for Foden? Not this week. I personally would sell Bruno Fernandes in Game Week 4 to Phil Foden or another midfielder of your choice like Maddison, but not this week. Fadil says, I have Havertz, Antony, and Diogo Jota and not happy with any of them. What do you think I should do? That's understandable. I think Havertz could actually come really good when Jesus returns to the team, and he's already back in training. He's in contention to start. So I actually think the inclusion of Zinchenko and Jesus to the starting 11 could be fantastic. Even Leandro Trossard. I think Antony, he is facing Forest and he could do well this week, but ultimately he's a sell. I think Antony's the biggest weak link there. I'd sell him first, and I would look towards Mbeumo. I think that's a really good transfer. And then you're looking at Havertz. Yeah, he's probably the second one I'd look to transfer. I think Jota's a better FPL asset as things stand. So Antony, Havertz to sell. I think Jota is still worth keeping despite a mixed bag of fixtures. Diaz to Foden or Botman to Gavardiol. Worth keeping Gabriel this week? I personally think so. But the likes of Chilwell, Estupinian, Saliba and a Man City defender, you know, I would consider Gabriel to one of those still, because long term I think they will outscore him significantly. And I'm still not too sure about Gabriel being nailed on in the long term now, which is a bit surprising. Joao Pedro out. It's tricky because I think he might start this week, but ultimately in the long term he is a sell. It's just a question of, do you do it this week or next week? Who do you sell to? Do you need to make another transfer? Are you taking a hit? There are so many different questions that also play a part in whether you should do it or not. But I personally would lean towards selling him, yes. I put Rico Lewis and Saliba sub. I mean, not too bad, I guess. Rico Lewis could get the nod, but you just never know there. Saliba, I think, could do very well against Fulham, but it's not really the worst thing in the world. You might be starting Chilwell, Estupinian, and a top defender as well, like a City defender, so it's not the worst, I think. So Rashford or Salah from -4. This week, it would be Salah. I wouldn't recommend selling Salah in any given game week for a -4, but that's a different story. Thank you, Aranya, for the super chat. I appreciate that very much. Fleckin, Turner, Gabriel, Chilwell, Estupinian, Baldock, Shaw, Mitoma, Saka, Gabriel, Bruno, Rashford, Joao Pedro, Erling, and Mbama. 2 free transfers with 2 million in the bank moves. Well, I think the clear standout to sell is Shaw, because he is out for a few weeks, so he will miss out Game Week 3 and Game Week 4 at the very least. So I think Shaw to... Tricky one. So you've got 3 Arsenal players already. I'd probably go from Shaw to a Man City defender like Gavardiol or Akanji. That's one move I'd make. And the other one, to be fair, you got 2 million in the bank. Probably Joao Pedro up to Jackson. That will be my 2 free transfers if you're doing it. The alternative is just to do Shaw to a City defender, roll the other transfer, and then have 2 free transfers yet again in Game Week 4, which could be a really big benefit to you. But I personally would do Joao Pedro to Jackson and Luke Shaw to either Akanji or Gavardiol. Let me know which way you're swinging towards in terms of Man City defenders, or if you've got another Man City defender or defender in general in mind. So thank you very much for the super chat there, Aranya, and hopefully I have helped with your query. Bring in Jackson for Joao Pedro or my 4.5 million. Probably for Joao Pedro, because extra million in the bank. You also might be in a situation where with 3 forwards and 5 midfielders, you're going to have plenty of benching headaches throughout the season. Look, having benching headaches isn't always a bad thing, and having good squad depth could come in handy, but I see a lot of managers, the way they play, and I think having those 8 attackers could be very frustrating, and I just wouldn't recommend it to most people. Surrender says, hi Dylan, Gabriel to Chilwell and Watkins to Jackson. Gabriel to Chilwell, yes. Not Watkins to Jackson this week, personally. I think Watkins could match or even outscore the Senegalese forward. Thoughts on Akanji? It's tricky because by the time I recommend him, and I've been talking about him plenty of times this week and last week, he gets benched. So it's kind of a fine line with Man City defenders and Pep Guardiola. But I think Akanji might be the most nailed on Man City defender alongside Gavardiol. Ruben Diaz is another one you always look at and you always think he's nailed. So I think one of those 3 is the best way to enter the Man City defence, and I would lean towards Akanji or the Croatian. So really tricky call. He's not going to be the best for goals, assists or bonus points, but he'll just tick along nicely, play most games. When he is benched, at least looking at last season, he will occasionally come on for one-pointers, which is frustrating. But when he, if you compare him to John Stones, for example, he will start way more games than him. Take out Cash or Botman or both. This week, I'd rather take out Botman. The fixtures do turn soon for Newcastle, but facing Liverpool this week, I think Newcastle will concede, and they lost both games to the Reds last season. And Cash is decent, I think, at the moment, so I'd probably sell Botman. It just really depends, though, in terms of taking out both. Is it for 2 free transfers? I certainly wouldn't take a hit to get rid of both. Smoker Shish, what a name. It says Martinelli, Saliba, João Pedro, and Udogi. Pick 2 to start. Martinelli and Saliba for me. Dylan, I have Eze and João Pedro. Who would you start? Probably João Pedro, and that's because I personally think he will start, but that's just my opinion. Take it with a pinch of salt. I might be completely wrong there. Soldier Boy says rank Alvarez, Jackson, Nketiah, Watkins, Pedro, Wissa. I have to say, Nketiah's done a good job when filling in, won the penalty in Game Week 2, created the chances for himself, which he did miss against Crystal Palace, but he's been playing pretty well, scored the first goal of the season for Arsenal. I still think he's probably second bottom or bottom of that list. So the way I'd rank it overall is Watkins first, Wissa second, Alvarez third, Jackson fourth, Pedro fifth, Nketiah sixth. However, fixtures do play a big part in that. And if I was looking to buy a striker right now, it's probably between Wissa and Jackson because of fixtures. And Watkins faces Liverpool next week, for example. The fixtures after that aren't the greatest. So it really depends. In long term, up until the end of the season, the way I ranked it is pretty much, the way I think is the best long term. If you're looking for maybe for the next 5 to 10 game weeks, I'd probably look at Wissa and Jackson, top 2. Pedro Torreira says, hi Dylan, need to make a transfer, have 2, don't have any issue in the squad. Would rather do transfer cash out to Gvardiol or Pickford to Sanchez maybe. Good question. I personally think Pickford is a worse option, than Matty Cash. However, I think cash out to Gvardiol looks like the most appealing transfer to me. You're getting a Man City defender with great fixtures coming up, plenty of clean sheets, and maybe Gvardiol won't be subbed on quite frequently when he does get benched. So it's a really tricky one. And you also look at Pickford's next 2 fixtures, and if Everton were ever to keep a clean sheet in the next 10 game weeks, you're probably looking at the next 2 game weeks there for him to do that. So if I had to pick, it's probably cash out to Gvardiol, but I'd still be looking at selling Pickford very soon. I've got Gvardiol and Haaland. Should I sell Johnston to Edison or Bruno to Foden? If it was a question of this week, I'd rather sell Johnston to Edison. However, the best long-term move, in my opinion, is probably Bruno out to Foden. So, really tricky one, that, Anthony. Let me know what you're leaning towards. Chilwell captain. Amongst defenders, he would be my favourite defender to captain, that's for sure. However, I think Erling Haaland, an Arsenal midfielder, even Rashford or Bruno, probably ahead of Chilwell in the pecking order. Mbeumo for Bruno or Pickford for some goalkeeper? I'd probably do Pickford to a goalkeeper this week. Long term, Bruno to Mbeumo, fantastic move. I'm not so sure about this week, though. Soldier Boy says bench 1, Chilwell, Gvardiol, Estupinian, Saliba, Pedro, Sterling, and Rashford. Great question. Probably Pedro, which is quite reluctant because he might even start with Enciso out injured. So that is a bit of a tricky one, but it's between Saliba and Pedro, and I'd probably bench Pedro. I'd say Maddison is a keep. Just like I said in yesterday's transfer tips video, I maintain that same belief, and we've got a positive update since then as well. Start 2 of Estupinian, Colwill, and Eze. Probably Estupinian and Colwill, as good as Eze is. I've got the exact same team as you, Dylan. My thoughts are to roll the free transfer and set up from there. Same thoughts there. Unfortunately, Goldhead, I mean, hopefully we both do well. If I do well, you do well, and vice versa. But yeah, I think that's probably the best call of action for our teams this week. I don't really see even Foden, who looks really appealing, in Mbeumo. I just don't think it's worth it this week. Start Jota or Maddison? Maddison. Captain Haaland, vice Bruno. Looks solid. I do prefer Rashford for the vice-captaincy over Bruno. The same goes for Saka and Martinelli, potentially even Odegaard as well. But Fernandes is a decent vice-captaincy option. Either way, Haaland will start, he'll probably score, and the vice-captaincy won't matter anyway. But it's good that you are thinking about the vice-captaincy too. Eze to Foden, a good transfer. Yes, I think so. And I'm not sure if you understand my history of Foden, but I have a really bad record with him. Whenever I bring him in, he suddenly gets benched or starts blanking. So regardless of my history or whatever, I still recognise he's a good asset with those upcoming fixtures, and I also think this is his best chance of getting minutes than he's ever gotten in that Man City team. Jackson or Watkins? Based on the upcoming fixtures, yes, I think Jackson is the better option at the moment. But would I sell Watkins to Jackson this week when Watkins faces Burnley away off the back of a hat-trick? No, I probably wouldn't. I want to sell Nunez. What do you recommend? Wissa or Jackson or Isak or who? My favourite at the moment is Wissa. It really is. If you haven't been already, then that's where I'd look towards a Jackson or Isak. And good that you mentioned Isak. I haven't talked about him yet today. Really good option when the fixtures turn. He could still score against Liverpool. I'd probably go for Jackson if you've got him boom already. So let me know your situation. Sterling in for a -4. Who are you selling? That would also play a part in whether you should do it or not. I think Sterling is a really good shout as a differential. And in terms of Chelsea attackers, apart from Jackson, I think Sterling's my second favourite. Got 2 free transfers. Who should go? Trent, Pedro, or Gabriel? Probably Trent because he's so expensive, faces Newcastle. I don't see a clean sheet there. And I look at the next 5-6 game weeks and maybe 2 clean sheets maximum for Liverpool. And I just don't think Trent is worth that 8 million at the moment. Team: Onana, Estupiñán, Chilwell, Akanji, Bruno, Saka, Martinelli, March, Pedro, Jackson, Haaland. Really good starting 11. I like it a lot. Yeah, quite. I mean, a lot of our teams are similar anyway, but naturally I will like your team. The only concern is whether Pedro will start or not, but the rest looks really good. Watkins to Jackson or Gabriel to Gvardiol? Gabriel to Gvardiol for me. Thoughts on Foden and Jackson and for Salah and Pedro for free? I probably would do it. I think I was asked this earlier. I'm not sure if it was by you or someone else, but my answer was yes, which is surprising because Salah is still a great asset and Pedro could start and do extremely well against West Ham. Look, for me, in terms of Spurs midfielders, it goes Maddison first, Son second, and Richarlison third. I just can't bring myself to recommend spending an extra 1.5 million on Son over Maddison. I just don't think it's worth the extra funds there. Should I start Maddison or sell him and get Kulusevski? I'd keep Maddison. Even if he doesn't start this week and he produces a 1 point or something like that, don't worry. Maddison will outscore Kulusevski quite comfortably, I think, so long as he stays fit. I have 1 free transfer, but I have Maddison, Gabriel, and Shaw. Who do I transfer? Shaw, because he's out for sure in Game Week 3 and 4. The others, I think Gabriel will start in 3 personally. Maddison has a chance of starting this weekend, according to their manager. So Shaw has to go for me. And in terms of who do you bring in, it all depends on the defenders you have already. I think Shaw is the standout defender to buy. Then it's probably a Man City defender like Gvardiol or Akanji. Saliba is also right up there. Estupiñán, despite the fixtures, is fantastic. So, yeah, Shaw out for one of those names, and you're good. Game Week 3, Rashford or Bruno to Maddison is fit. Honestly, I'd keep Rashford and Bruno this week. I know they've been very frustrating, but look at the numbers. They are there. They should have returned so far. And in the first half against Tottenham, I actually think Man United played relatively well. So I think they will win against Nottingham Forest. At least one of Rashford or Bruno will haul, and it's worth keeping both of them, in my opinion. And look, if you're still insistent and saying, look, Dylan, I want to sell one of them, just tell me the answer. I'd rather sell Bruno. Hey, Dylan, Zinchenko good to bring in? I wouldn't bring him in necessarily. I know Tomiyasu is suspended, and it really should be rescinded, that suspension. I don't know why it hasn't been already. Timber's out as well. Tierney's on the verge of joining Real Sociedad on loan. But Kivior can still play left back. I wouldn't be surprised if Gabriel played there as well. So it's a tricky one, I think, with Zinchenko. I think he might start against Fulham, but he's injury prone. I think Saliba's the best Arsenal defender. I probably would go elsewhere. Akanji or Walker or Gvardiol? It's between Akanji and Gvardiol for me. I know Walker started the first 2 games, but if you look at the end of last season, Walker was benched very, very often, especially in the Champions League final, which is quite telling. So Walker's a top quality defender. I think he'll get more starts this season than he did in the last campaign, but I'd rather go for Akanji or Gvardiol. Is Gabriel starting? I think so. That's just my opinion, though. Take over pinch of salt. I said it last week, got it wrong as well. I also thought in Game Week 1 he'd start. And of course, the news came out a few minutes before the deadline. Havertz to Sterling, Rashford to Foden, and Foden back to Rashford after the international break. Good set of transfers, but I personally don't think Rashford to Foden is worth it. And I'm not sure if it's unpopular opinion, but I think Rashford will outscore Foden in Game Week 3. Mohammed says, should I bring Foden and Mbeumo for Martinelli and Rashford? Look, good transfers. I like the players you're bringing in. I think Mbeumo is probably the best of the lot. But I wouldn't do it this week. That's just my opinion. I just can't bring myself to sell Martinelli and Rashford up against two of the worst teams in the league, you could argue, especially Fulham, on the basis of the first 2 game weeks of the season. Or I take Ruben and Mbeumo for Martinelli and Gabriel. I'd rather do that Gabriel to Ruben Diaz move, but yeah, I think long term, what I'd look to do in your situation is sell Rashford in Game Week 4 to Mbeumo, and you can even do that for Martinelli as well. So make those transfers, but in Game Week 4, and if you're worried about burning a transfer this week, then maybe look to bolster someone on your bench or your goalkeeper. I have a free transfer. Should I get rid of Gabriel? I think to one of Chilwell, Estupiñán, Saliba, or a City defender, yes, I would look to sell Gabriel. But apart from that, I'd be inclined to keep Gabriel for at least 1 more week. I think he will start. Now, long term, he is going to be a bit, you're always going to have concerns about him because there is the possibility of him being benched depending on how Arsenal line up and the opposition. So it's a tricky one. Long term, I think he is a sell, especially to one of those 4 names I gave you. But apart from that, I just don't see many defenders outscoring him this week because I personally think he will start. Will Maddison start every single game? So long as Man City still have a title to defend, then yes, I think so. Pedro to which forward have 2.5 million in the bank? Probably Jackson. It's between him and Wissa, and probably Jackson there. Bench 1, Gabriel or Martinelli? Gabriel. I'd start Martinelli. Pick 2, Pedro, Gusto, and Henry. I'd go for Pedro and probably Gusto. Start Gabriel or Henry? Gabriel. Martinelli to Mbeumo once Jesus is back in the 11. I actually think Jesus coming back could benefit Martinelli. But yeah, I think Martinelli to Mbeumo is a good transfer in Game Week 4. Worth taking a -4 to go Gabriel to Saliba? No. I don't think it's worth it because I personally think both will start and I don't see a 4-point difference between the two. Now, long term, will Saliba outscore Gabriel by 4 points? Yes. And in that regard, the transfer, the hit isn't too bad. But I think this week, you could maybe wait another week in order to make that move, in my personal opinion. Start with Doggy or Gabriel? Gabriel. Bench 1, we've done that. Downgrade Salah for Foden in Mbeumo. Downgrade Salah for Foden in Mbeumo. I probably would, yeah. And Mbeumo's my favourite of the 2. Shaw to Henry this or next game week. I'm not starting him this week in any matter. Yeah, I think that's a good move. And Henry has Bournemouth at home next week, so you might reconsider that anyway. But I do like Rico Henry as a 4-point million defender. Transfer Martinelli and get Foden or keep Martinelli. I would keep him this week. I think he'll do well against Fulham. Thank you, Zlatan. Best replacement for Shaw and Edouard. For Luke Shaw, it's one of those 4 names I said. Chilwell, Estupiñán, a Man City defender like Akanji, and Saliba. So any one of those names that you don't already have, go for them. As for Edouard, not sure what your budget is, but I think Wissa is a really good transfer, even Alvarez as well. Diaz to Gavadio, I'm not so sure I would make that move. I can understand maybe the logic because you might want to use those extra 0.5 million in funds to upgrade another position. If that's the case, then fine. But otherwise, I'd probably just keep Ruben Diaz for now. Hey, Dylan, should I... Let me just get the question up because the chat is going crazy at the moment. Should I start Gabriel or Pau Torres? I personally would start Gabriel. Odegaard out for Sterling. Look, I think Sterling could be a fantastic differential this week and also for the coming weeks to come. So it's a tricky one. I probably wouldn't. I think Odegaard potentially being on penalties, having the assist and bonus points potential. I don't think neither Odegaard or Sterling have particularly great stats so far, but tricky one. I will recognise that Sterling has been better in the first 2 game weeks from an FPL perspective in terms of open play. He looks more threatening than Odegaard does, but just not so sure. I probably wouldn't. I think Odegaard could do really well in the coming weeks. Who would you bring in this week, Mbeumo or Mitoma? Mbeumo, because Mitoma has one of the worst fixture runs he will have all season up until Game Week 9. Should I replace Gabriel or Botman that is on my bench with a Doggy? Honestly, I probably wouldn't. Botman's fixtures turn soon, and with Gabriel, I'd rather sell him to a Man City defender, Estupinian, Chilwell, or Saliba. I don't see enough clean sheets for Spurs, and I also think Udogie could be rotated very soon. Best sure replacement have Chilwell, Estupinian, Gabriel, and Udogie, a Man City defender, so either a Kanji or Gavardiol for me. In general, do you think Pedro to Jackson is worth a -4? Yes, I think so. It might not pay off this week, but it ultimately will, I think, over the next 3 or 4. Bowen to Sterling, yep, I'd probably go ahead with it. Bowen can play up front for West Ham, but I think Sterling is a better asset with those fixtures. Bruno to Mbumo or save a transfer and do it next week? Do it next week, in my opinion. I actually think Bruno could outscore Mbumo. Bench Mbumo or Gabriel? Gabriel. Do I transfer anyone out of Rashford, Son, Eze, Saka, and Mitoma to Mbumo? My personal, my preference would be to sell either Son or Eze to Mbumo, and because of funds and him simply not living up to his price tag, I'd rather sell Son. I do understand if you're a bit unsure about that because he's facing Bournemouth and it's got some great fixtures, but I ultimately think Son is worth selling, and I think him to Mbumo is a great transfer. Bench Mbumo or Gabriel, we covered. Short to Gavardiol? Yes, I think that's a good move. Is putting in Rodri and Odegaard a smart choice? We discussed Rodri after his Game Week 1 performance against Burnley. A Man City fan said he's going to bring him in. And look, as a 5-point family in option, he'll tick along nicely, play every game, get the occasional screamer from outside the box, and he is a threat from set pieces. But I would rather spend 5.5 or 6 million on a Wissa up front, or going for a 5-man midfield and having Mbumo, he's now 6.7 million, but, that sort of player as your 5th midfielder or Mitoma. However, having said all that, Rodri's still fine. I actually don't think he'll be that bad. He'll score more than 100 FPL points. And as for Odegaard, he is currently on penalties, it seems, and he is also a bonus points machine. Whenever he scores or assists, he's got a great chance of being in amongst the bonus points. So, yeah, I think they're good transfers, they're good moves, but Rodri's not my favourite. That's just my personal opinion. Bench 2, Udogie, Saliba, Chilwell, Akanji, Estupinian. I would bench Udogie and probably Saliba. Welcome, Cohen. Anana, Chilwell, Estupinian, Saliba, Ruben Diaz, Mitoma, Rashford, Martinelli, Saka, Bruno, Haaland. Jackson, need help picking 11. Okay, so Anana speaks for himself. I would go for Chilwell, Estupinian and Ruben Diaz as your back 3. I would also go for the midfield 5 that you just mentioned there, all of them starting, and start that front 2. So basically, I would bench Saliba there. Hopefully you got that, Cohen. Botman or Share? I prefer Botman because last season he was better than the Swiss in terms of points per 90. And I also think Botman is slightly better for bonus points, more readily available. I think Share is quite injury prone. And despite Share's added goal threat, I think Botman is a slightly better option. ¿Qué defensor puedo comprar por 4.4 millones? Tengo a Mings lesionado. Y lamentablemente no hay muchas opciones, pero creo que el mejor en este momento sería Gusto de Chelsea, pero no creo que sea una opción para el largo plazo. Diaby or Wissa? Wissa for me. In most, even this week, it's a bit closer. I think Diaby arguably has the better fixture, but I think Wissa is the better FPL option for sure. So Wissa for me. Could you rank these options going forward in order? Great question. Really tricky to separate all of them. I would go for Jackson first, Foden second, Alvarez third, and Sterling fourth. Really close though. We're talking about fine margins between each rank there. Chilwell captain, I'm not completely against it. He's the best defender to captain this week for me, but I'm still not completely convinced about Chelsea. It wouldn't surprise me if they conceded. They are particularly vulnerable from set pieces. I think Luton Town could score a goal like that. Morris is also a threat. He's a good goal scorer. And yeah, Chilwell's still a great option to captain, don't get me wrong, but I'm looking at Haaland, Arsenal midfielders, United attackers. I think they're the standouts this week. Sal Gabriel and Shaw to White and Borro. Look, they're not bad transfers you're making, and ultimately you will be upgrading, but I'd rather go to Saliba from Arsenal, and I'm looking at, that Pedro Porro slot, and I'd rather go for Estupinian, Chilwell, and a Man City defender like a Kanji or Gvardiol for me. Thiago Silva or the Sassy? Probably the Sassy. Gabriel to Saliba. Yeah, I think that's a good move. Do I start Jota or keep him on the bench? Who is the alternative? Is it Jota versus, which name in particular? I wouldn't mind starting Jota this week. He's playing down the middle for Liverpool. There could be rotation with Nunez, but, you're always going to get that with Liverpool assets. Wasting, come on, that's your own club you're talking about. Start Pedro or Diaby? Probably Pedro. I think he'll start, so that's where I base my opinion on. Who should I play, Isak or Pedro? Probably Pedro, but a really close call. Mbeumo or Mitoma instead of Eze? I would buy Mbeumo because long-term I think he's a better option than Mitoma with fixtures in mind, being on penalties too. This week, I think Mitoma outscores Mbeumo, so I promise you, I'm not sitting on the fence. It's just literally my full in-depth analysis. I think Mitoma's better this week, but when you're making a transfer, you're looking at the medium to long term, so Mbeumo is my ultimate answer. Thoughts on Salah and Pedro to Diaz and Jackson? I like it. Salah will probably still score more points than Diaz, but not enough to justify the extra 3-4 million between them. And as for Pedro to Jackson, that's a great upgrade. So ultimately, you're getting a better duo, in my opinion. Watkins to Jackson, not this week. I personally wouldn't do it. Estupinian or Chilwell? I think Estupinian is a better option overall, but if I'm buying one now, it's Chilwell. He's got better fixtures, and I think Chelsea will keep more clean sheets. We have covered that, Sarab and Anas. We have covered those questions. What else do we have? I'm going to try to go for some different ones. I do realize that there were some questions I haven't been able to answer. I do apologize, but the chat has been quite busy. How about Chelsea defensive double up? I'm not too keen. It's not bad, with those fixtures coming up. It's a decent time to do it, but I'm still not confident enough in Chelsea as a team and defensively for me to go there. I think Chilwell is enough. Ward-Prowse or Paqueta? Ward-Prowse. Mbeumo or Mitoma instead of Eze? Mbeumo. Thoughts on Walker? He's been very solid so far, but I think he will be rotated eventually. Once John Stones comes back, Man City could then do that. John Stones as a right back, inverting into the midfield again, and that could be a problem for Walker. Who to bench between Gabriel or Ake? Great question, because Ake didn't start in Game Week 2. Gabriel hasn't started a game so far, to be fair, but I'd probably go for Gabriel. I'm not sure if Ake starts. Start Botman, Pedro, or Nakamba? Pedro. Welcome, Jimmy. I was wondering what a good bench boost is. Good predicted points for the bench. I think 15 points on a bench boost is fairly decent. Of course, when you have a double game week and you're bench boosting there, you always hope for a bit more than that, so 20 plus, but I think 15 plus is a good bench boost score. Thoughts on Salah and Pedro? Yeah, we've covered that, user. How many points is a good bench boost? Yeah, I'd say 15. Thank you, Lager, for moderating the chat. I appreciate it. Jota to Sterling. I actually don't mind that at all. Now, I am a bit of a boring manager sometimes. I kind of prefer the reliable picks like Mbeumo. And Sterling once was a reliable asset 3 or 4 years ago. But since he's joined Chelsea and his last year at City, it hasn't really clicked for him. With those fixtures, though, I'm really for that move, and I think it could be fantastic. Bench 1, Gvardiol, Gabriel, Chilwell, Stupinian, Gabriel. Gabore to Colwill. Yeah, not a bad transfer at all. I think it's an upgrade, so yeah. Thoughts on starting Gabriel? I think he'll start, and like I said, he scored in both occasions against Fulham last season. He is one of the best in terms of goal-scoring threat of any defender. I think Gabriel's a fantastic option when he's nailed, and unfortunately he isn't nowadays, but yeah, I think he is a good option and he's a decent option to start. Foden to Maddison or Rashford for a -4? Wait, you're surely not selling Foden. I'm guessing it's the other way round. I wouldn't take a -4 hit in either case, whether you're selling Foden, bringing him in, selling Rashford, etc. I wouldn't take a -4 hit this week for such a move. I think Rashford to Foden in Game Week 4 for free is the best thing to do. I have the same team as you, but with Mbeumo instead of Mitoma, and Udogie instead of Henry. 2 free transfers. Advice? Yeah, a bit of a tricky one there. It's a really tricky one because you don't want to burn a transfer. I'd probably look at upgrading Bulldog potentially. I think that's maybe the way to go. He's still an injury doubt, faces Man City this week. So maybe getting rid of Baldock, or even changing Osula to Archer, who has just joined Sheffield United, and you would expect Cameron Archer to start up front. So that's the sort of move you could look at. It's not great, you're not really going to benefit from it, but you're not burning a transfer, and you never know. You might need that 4 million defender or 4.5 million forward to come in for you at some point. Akanji replacing Shaw for a -4? No. I know Shaw's missing out, and if Akanji keeps a clean sheet, he'll gain you 2 points. In that perspective, it's not too bad, but I just don't really like defender transfers in general for a hit. Look, long term it's worth it. The hit will pay off eventually, so it's a good transfer, but just be careful with hits. If you've got a decent option on your bench like Rico Henry, just start him. It's honestly not that bad. I feel like Jackson is such an overrated transfer. Yeah, I get what you mean, because he hasn't scored a Premier League goal yet. He had a good pre-season, a great end to his Villarreal career too, but we need to see more from him, and in front of goal, he has been poor so far, but with those fixtures, the underlying numbers, and Jackson's, you have to say, trajectory in his career, you'd still expect him to bounce back and do very well. Hi Dylan, are you going to keep both United players? Yeah, technically all three with Onana included. In Gameweek 4 though, I am looking to sell both Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. I'm not sure about differentials, but there's going to be a lot of people selling them, and I think it's a mistake. If they struggle yet again, then obviously the sellers will be laughing, but I think the right decision is to keep them. Head Nottingham Forest at home. You look at Man United's record against them, 9 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. Last season, they didn't concede a single goal against them. They scored 2+ on each occasion. I'm expecting a 2-0 victory myself, so I would keep them. Bench Eze or Pedro? Eze. Bench 1. It's between Colwill and Diaby for me. I'd probably bench Colwill. Alone says Akanji. I like him. In terms of Man City defenders, it's between him and Gvardiol. Welcome, Tommy. Good to see you. News on Maddison. We covered him already. So Postecoglou said in his press conference that Maddison trained today and that as things stand, he is available for the weekend. That doesn't mean he's definitely starting. They're still monitoring the injury, but it doesn't look too serious. Eriksen this season as an FPL option, no chance. Steve Johnson says, I messed up last week starting Pedro over Mbumo. What do you think for this week? I actually think Pedro, if he starts, which is a big if, is a better option than Mbumo, but because of that doubt in my mind, and with Mbumo's form, being on penalties, which Pedro is as well, to be fair, I'd go for Mbumo, but simply because I'm not completely sure about Pedro starting. Just for a reference point, the Zerbi said that Ferguson is definitely starting this weekend, so I still think João Pedro will start as an attacking midfielder behind Ferguson, but by no means is that a certainty. Best time to free hit, it's a team-dependent question, and I always look at a blank or double game week to use a free hit, but sometimes a single game week can be worth it, but I generally look at a special circumstance. Is Chua captain a good differential? Yes, I think so. I do think there are better options for the captaincy, but he is a good one. That's for sure. Thank you to everyone for subscribing and for supporting the channel. We did hit 19,000 subscribers today, so thank you very much for that. And the next aim is to get to 20,000, so be sure to support the channel even further. Share this video around with those that love FPL and UCL Fantasy. My voice is a bit hoarse at the moment, so I do apologize for that. I'll try to sort that out. We've still got over an hour left for the deadline, and if you've got any more questions, you know, comments, anything like that, then be sure to let me know down in the live chat. And yeah, I will be streaming to around 6:30. Normally I kind of stick around a little bit afterwards, but I do have other commitments afterwards, so yeah, just to let you know in advance. But in the meantime, here we go, another hour or so left of this stream, so be sure to get your questions in. Mbumo or Foden to Martinelli? I think Mbumo is the best transfer overall. I wouldn't sell Martinelli this week. Diaby to Foden this game week, or save the extra free transfer for next game week? I probably would do it this week. I like Diaby, but I think Foden is an upgrade this week, and with Sheffield United, you'd be tempted to make the move now. You don't need to, but I think it's worth it. Captain Saka or Rashford as a differential? I prefer Saka. He's my vice-captain at the moment. Rashford has a better record against Nottingham Forest than Saka does against Fulham, but I think with the amount of chances Fulham are conceding, you know, their expected goals conceded was almost 3 on both occasions, including Everton at home, or sorry, Everton away in Game Week 1. Yeah, I'd go for Saka there. Welcome, Arthur. I had 2 free transfers and 2 million in the bank. Did Gabriel to Diaz due to price drop. Didn't do Pedro to Jackson despite price rise. Did I make a mistake? I wouldn't say you made a mistake. And Gabriel to Diaz is ultimately worth it, I think. Diaz will rotate, will be rotated occasionally, but at the moment it looks like he's more nailed on than Gabriel. Thank you for the super chat. Let me just bring this up. So thank you to Arthur. I appreciate it. I literally just answered your question anyway. Yeah, but it's a tricky one. Like, I generally would have preferred Pedro to Jackson. Having said that, I think Gabriel to Diaz is a decent move, despite him being 0.5 million more expensive. And I understand it. You know, Gabriel's going to go down in price, and that would have maybe priced you out from other options in the future. So with Diaz, you can at least downgrade if that turns out to be a mistake, but I think it's a decent acquisition. Pedro to Jackson does look like the better move, but let's wait and see how things pan out. I actually think he will buy, but it's not a guarantee. You know, he hasn't played enough minutes in pre-season, and of course, he's just coming back from injury. So, yeah, I think he will, but it's not a guarantee. Is a Kanji choice a good one? Yes, I think so. I think the deadline is at 6:30, Twisted Parky. I think it's at 6:30. DEKK says JP, Rashford, and Shaw to Watkins, Gvardiol, and Matoma. Worth it? JP, or Joao Pedro. Yes, I think it is worth it. Now, one thing I would say, and I know you're doing this move to be able to afford Watkins, I wouldn't sell Rashford this week. I genuinely think he will do well. Whether he scores or assists, I actually think he'll score. I just think it's a tricky one to sell him in Game Week 3. But if you can, Joao Pedro to Jackson and Shaw to Mitoma, Shaw to Gvardiol, if you can do that for free, I think that's even better for this week. And then in Game Week 4, you can sell Rashford and then go to, let's say, for example, Mitoma. But I think Mbeumo is even better if you don't have him already. Long-term players to target on the wildcard. Mbeumo is a standout. Saliba, Stupinian is a tricky one, but I still would include him. Chilwell, I probably just said him already. My bad if I did. A Man City defender like a Kanji or Gvardiol. I have made a best wildcard team video if you want to check that out. I'd say one of Jackson or Wissa. Even Alvarez is a shout up front. Foden in the midfield. Bukayo Saka. Yeah, I think those are generally some really good long-term acquisitions for you on the wildcard. Jackson to Watkins or Isak. At this moment in time, I prefer Watkins, but Isak will certainly become hot property very soon. Best Gabriel replacement. Chilwell, for me, is the standout. Then you're looking at a C defender like a Kanji or Gvardiol. After that, you're looking at Saliba. And after that, yeah, I think any of those would be fine anyway. Hello, Dylan. Botman or Joao Pedro or Mbeumo? Mbeumo for me. Pedro's going to be benched according to a recent press conference. Not necessarily. I understand what you mean. De Zerbi said that Ferguson will start, but Joao Pedro has been playing as an attacking midfielder for Brighton behind Welbeck in Game Week 1, for example, and in pre-season. Now it's Ferguson playing up front. It could still be Joao Pedro as the attacking midfielder or second striker, and Mitoma on the left and March on the right. So I understand what you're saying. It does reduce his chances of starting in Game Week 3, but that doesn't mean he's definitely going to be benched. For me, though, Mbeumo has to start, you know, based on current form, and also you know he's going to start for sure. With Joao Pedro, you do have that doubt in your mind regardless. You think captaining Jackson is a good differential idea? If you want to be different, yes, you know, with the underlying numbers, you know, his form at the end of last season for Villarreal, how impressive he was in pre-season, but I personally wouldn't captain him. I just don't think his ceiling is high enough to go for him captain over Saka, Rashford, Haaland, etc. Ward-Prowse or Douglas Luiz? Ward-Prowse. Captain Saka or Rashford as a differential? Saka, in my opinion. Rashford, like I said, better record against Nottingham Forest. He could be great, but I'd still prefer Saka. Chill or captain, let's go. Good luck, Roku. Best Gabriel replacement is Gabriel. Fair enough. Start Jota instead of Havertz, Joao Pedro, or just keep him on the bench. I would probably start Jota over Joao Pedro, but it's not really a bad thing what you've done there. Martinelli or Foden or Mbeumo for this week? For this week, Probably Foden, but really close call. Martinelli, Foden, and Boomer for this week. Yeah, just the same thing. Milner says, got Haaland, Watkins, Bruno, Rashford, Mbeumo, Mitoma, Saka, Stupinana, Kanji, Chilwell, and Onana. Do I captain Haaland or Watkins? I personally would go for Haaland over Watkins this week, but if you want to go against Haaland captaincy, I would pinpoint Saka or Rashford as the alternatives. Even Chilwell is in the top 5 there, but I wouldn't captain Watkins this week despite his hat-trick. Salah sell or not yet? I'd probably sell him, as good as he is. Welcome KA7 Lancy. Opinions: Onana, Romero, Stupinian, Chilwell, Diogo, Saka, Matoma, Sarr, Mbeumo, Wissa, and Haaland. I got Walker, Jackson, Chelsea, and Saliba on the bench. What should I do for captaincy and bench? Don't bench Jackson, that's for sure. I'd go for Jackson over Diogo Jota in your starting 11. I'm not sure if you're talking about Pape Sarr to start. Don't. I'd start Saliba over Pape Sarr and Jackson over Diogo Jota. The rest is fine. I'm not a big fan of Romero. You know, he's a hothead. He gets a lot of yellow cards, the occasional red card. I don't think Spurs are great defensively. So I think he's also someone you could upgrade on in the future. But yeah, Pape Sarr and Diogo Jota probably making way. I think that's the way to go. Would you bench boost Turner, Maddison, Udogie, and Saliba? No. I think Maddison and Saliba could make for a very good bench boost. And you never know from Udogie, but not for me. I think there's going to be better benches for you in the future. Jackson to Watkins now, or should I save it for next week? Next week for me. Alvarez or Jackson? Really close call. I think Alvarez is a better player, plays in a better team. But because of fixtures, the underlying numbers, I'd probably go for Jackson. Junior says, got forced into short transfer, so also have Maddison and Gabriel and didn't have enough players to start. Yeah, that's fair enough, and Shaw was the priority transfer out. Play Eze or Joao Pedro? Joao Pedro for me. He's not a guaranteed starter in Gameweek 3, but in my opinion, he will start behind Ferguson and alongside the two wingers, Mitoma and March. I wouldn't bring in Edison for a hit. If it was for free, fair enough, but Pickford might have a decent chance of a clean sheet this week and next week. I wouldn't take a hit for Edison, personally. Which City defender would you bring in if you had to? It's between Akanji and the Croatian Gvardiol, as I said before. If I had to pick, probably Akanji, just because for a period of 6-7 months, he has been starting pretty much week in, week out as a centre-back, left-back, and right-back. Let's have a quick look at how we're doing so far in the stream. So, yeah, we do have over 150 people watching. Thank you to those of you who have tuned in. But let's try to get these likes up. And the aim is, by the end of the deadline, which is in around an hour's time, to get to 150 plus likes. So be sure to do that if you can. It'd be greatly appreciated. And a huge shout out goes to those who send in a super chat. So Aranya and also Arthur. And also to all the channel members and patrons, all the subscribers, as we hit 19,000 subscribers today. So thank you very much for all the support. Start Diaby or Nketiah. Tricky one with Jesus back now from injury, but probably Nketiah. Wissa or Eze? Wissa. Gabriel and Rashford to Gvardiol and Jackson. Good idea? For me, no, because you're getting rid of Rashford, and I mean, you are saying Rashford out for Jackson, but Rashford is a midfielder, so that would also incur a hit and a transfer up front. I personally wouldn't sell Rashford this week. Gabriel to Gvardiol, though, looks solid. Matt says Pedro to Alvarez, Stones to Pinnock, free transfers. Yeah, I like it. I'm guessing you can't afford Rico Henry. That's why you're going for Pinnock, who is solid, reliable, got a bit of goal threat as well. I like those moves. You could maybe consider, if you really want to target fixtures, Colwill and double up in Chelsea defensively, but I think Pinnock's the way to go, and having a Brentford piece of cover there. Joao Pedro to Wissa, I would do it. Joao Pedro might actually outscore Wissa this week, but doesn't matter. I think Wissa is the best long-term move, really. So whether you do it now or next week is up to you, and it depends on your team situation, but I probably would do it. And my advice would be to do it in Game Week 4. Ali Bashir says Foden and Jackson or Alvarez and Martinelli. Great question. Foden and Jackson just about edges it for me. Pickford to Sanchez or Johnston? Sanchez because of fixtures. Should I bring in another Arsenal defender for Gabriel or bring in a City defender? At this moment in time, I would go for a City defender. I think Saliba will probably have the highest ceiling of any of them in terms of bonus points, even the odd goal threat, but Yeah, based on fixtures, I'd go for a C defender. Let's see what else we have. Thank you for the super chat there, Wardy. Very much appreciated. Wildcard, Sanchez, Henry, Estupinian, Chilwell, Mbumo, Saka, Foden, Bruno, Haaland, Alvarez, Jackson, Bench, Luis Diaz, Udogi, Botman, bank 0.9 million. Good team. I like it a lot. Difficult to pick out holes in it. I'm guessing Bruno is kind of a 1 week punt, and then you're looking to sell him in Game Week 4. Yeah, I really like this team. My main concern is this thing, and look, it doesn't mean your team's bad, by the way. It's literally just the way I like to play the game and how I think it benefits most people. Because you have 3 forwards who are of top quality, you've also got 5 good midfielders, you're always going to have these decisions where you have to bench someone. And I know Diaz looks like the clear one to bench this week with Newcastle, but he can still do well because of his quality, and Liverpool are a threat offensively. And I think every single week you might have some bench points, and it could be very frustrating for you. Now, in terms of things I would do overall with this team, I personally prefer Sanchez to, let's say Onana, Flecken. But Sanchez is still a decent pick. You're going for the fixtures. I like that double up. Henry Estupinian, no problems with that whatsoever. I would personally go for Saliba or a Man City defender over a doggy. I think that would be a major upgrade for you, and I know that might also be contradictory because you are basically bolstering your squad depth and you're only going to add more benching headaches. But the way I'd probably play it if it was my wild card is Udogi up to Saliba, or let's say Gavadio / Akanji, and the midfield is pretty much perfect as it is. You could always take out Bruno Fernandes to, let's say, Maddison or someone else next week. Even Raheem Sterling is another shout. And as for the front three, looks really solid. I like Wissa a lot as well, but yeah, I really think it's a good thing. Now, one thing I will say about the squad that if you have, and this will be the positive about it, is because you have some rotation risks like Foden, Alvarez, that's where the squad depth could come in handy. But my issue with Foden and Alvarez is when they are benched, they will still come on, especially if City need a goal, and they'll give you 1-pointers, and thus it blocks those on your bench anyway. But really good team. I like it a lot. I'm really being nitpicky and just picking out holes and, just giving you my opinion about it. But I think one major upgrade for your wildcard is a doggy up to an Arsenal or Man City defender. Let me know what else you think there. And thank you very much for the super chat. Gavadio or Joao Pedro? Probably Gavadio just to be on the safe side. Start Gusto or Joao Pedro? Joao Pedro. Salah or Eze? Salah. Sub-goalie Alriola, says Wardy. Yeah, I think he's probably the best one at the moment. Close between him and Turner as the best 4 million options. Who to bench for Jackson? Pedro or Martinelli? I would bench Pedro there, Ahmet. Welcome, Twan. Sell Rashford, Bruno to bring Foden or Mbumo? I personally wouldn't sell either this week. I know I'm being very stubborn, but I genuinely think with the underlying numbers, the great first-half performance, or at least the good first-half performance against Spurs, and the chances Rashford and Bruno had, I think it's worth keeping them for one more week against Forest, and then you can look to bring in both Foden and Mbumo. Now, if I had to prioritise a transfer, it would be Bruno to Mbumo, but I would look to do that in Game Week 4-1, not right now. As for Vicario, not a bad show. I think he was pretty impressive against Man United, but I still don't trust Spurs defensively, and I think there are better FPL goalkeepers elsewhere. In terms of selling short to Udogi or Arsenal defender, I would go to an Arsenal defender, and Saliba would be my preferred pick there. So if I had to make a move this week, Twan, it would be Udogi to Saliba, and then next week bring in Mbumo for Bruno Fernandes. Would you consider shorter Gavadio and Pedro to Alvarez? Yeah, definitely, 100%. Alisson Becker or Areola for goalkeeper? Alisson. Tommy says, in my opinion, Martinelli is such an overrated option. Odegaard and Saka much better value for money picks. I disagree because, yeah, so far this season, he hasn't been great. Only 1 assist in 2 games, and he's been... I'd say in pre-season he wasn't great as well, but if you look at last season, there was only 10 points separating Odegaard, Martinelli and Saka, and Martinelli is $500,000 cheaper than them this season, so I think he will kind of keep up with them. He'll start producing some returns. He is a bit of a form player, so he can have these really big streaks where he just seems to score every single game and then go missing for 4 or 5 games, but I still think he's a solid choice. I don't think Man City keeper rotation is a thing to worry about, but if you have that kind of thing at the back of your mind, because Ortega is a solid backup, then you can consider just going for Gvardiol or Akanji in the defense. I would go for Gabriel over Cash there. I think that's the way to go there. Bob Priest, so Gabriel over Cash. Why Jackson? I mean, I don't even have him this week. I just think he's a good option with the fixtures in mind and the underlying numbers. I also think Chelsea will come good eventually, and Jackson will lead the line fairly well. Start 2, Colwill and Mbeumo Martinelli. Mbeumo Martinelli. I would bench Colwill there. Should I go for Gabriel to Gvardiol or go for a bench option? My bench is Archer, Baldock, Kabore, Turner plus 0.5 million in the bank. I'd probably go from Gabriel to Gvardiol. Now, it's a really tricky one, this game. FPL is funny. It wouldn't surprise me if you sold Gabriel to Gvardiol and Gabriel scores, gets a 15-pointer, and, you know, makes you just hit your screen or something. But I still think in the long term it's worth it, because at this moment in time, it just doesn't seem like Gabriel is nailed on. Who to buy if I sell Shaw? I have only Gabriel on the bench. Yeah, so for me, Chilwell's the standout to buy this week. Then you're looking at an Arsenal Man City defender, so Saliba or Gvardiol or Akanji. And then after that, it's still a Stupinian because of how good he is in general. So any one of those options would be fine. Keep Gabriel. I personally think he'll get back into the side and nail down a spot yet again. So if I still had Gabriel personally, I probably would keep him. That's just my genuine opinion. And the only reason why I wouldn't do that is if I had 2 free transfers. I wanted to keep Bruno and Rashford this week, which is what I'm doing. And I had to make a move, and I would do Gabriel to Saliba. But really, if you're not getting in Chilwell, a C defender, or Saliba, I think it might be worth keeping Gabriel. Joao Pedro or Mbeumo? Mbeumo. Yeah, we've covered Maddison extensively already. Postecoglou said he trained today and that he's available as things stand. That doesn't mean he's going to start for sure, but he's in contention. Thoughts on selling Rashford and Archer for Eze and Jackson, says Ben Cox. I wouldn't sell Rashford this week. That would be my simple answer. Overall, it's a good set of transfers, but even then, Eze's fixtures aren't the greatest. And if you were to go for a 6.5 to 7 million midfielder, I would rather go to Mbeumo. Also, Luca Dean, bit of a yellow card magnet for my liking. I think he got a yellow card in both games so far, and also in the Conference League qualifier in midweek. So not too sure about Luca Dean. I'd rather go for Cash, Onsa, or Pau Torres from Aston Villa. And overall, I think there are better options elsewhere. Sterling captain. Look, I don't want to put people off. I always like it when I see a different kind of suggestion, you know, whether it's a transfer or captaincy option. I think Sterling could be very explosive this week. He's actually been very impressive on the eye, not looking just at stats because they haven't been that great, but looking at his overall performances. I think he was great against West Ham, won the penalty which Enzo Fernandez missed, and I think it could be a really good shout. I personally think Haaland, Arsenal midfielders, Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, Chilwell are better options, but I think Sterling is a really good differential shout, and I wouldn't mind that at all. Start with Doggy or Malo Gusto. I have Chilwell. I'd go for Gusto. Dylan, if you had a free transfer to burn, who would you transfer from your team? Great question. As I said to someone else earlier, I'm not sure exactly who it was. I'd look at maybe a bench transfer, so even Turner to Areola, which probably would be, you know, not a big priority, but it's just a way of not burning the transfer. I'd also look at doing Osula to Archer, because Archer's been signed by Sheffield United. He should start there up front for them. Even Baldock to another 4 million defender could be on the cards as well. But because I've got nothing in the bank, I believe, yeah, I've got nothing in the bank. Because of that, I'd probably be quite happy to even burn a transfer in my case. But really, I think that's what I'd look to do. Probably just upgrading Osula or moving him on to Archer. Is a Brentford triple up worth it, Dylan? I mean, considering their form, yes, I think it is worth it. I think a sweet spot is having 2. So going for Mbeumo and Henry. But the 2 best options at the moment are Mbeumo and Wissa. They've been absolutely fantastic. So a triple up isn't the worst, honestly. There's worse teams to triple up on, I assure you. Thank you, Medica. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone else for watching. Like I've said before, if you haven't already, be sure to smash the like button, subscribe for new. We have hit 19,000 subscribers today, and we are looking to get to 150 plus likes before we end this stream. I would go for Saliba there, Mogul, over Gusto. Welcome, Marco. 2 free transfers: Onana, Saliba, Chilwell, Estupinian, Rashford, Bruno, Martinelli, Saka, Mbumo, Jackson, Haaland captain. Decent bench as well. Generally considering Kabore to Gusto and bench boost too early. It's not the worst bench boost in the world, that's for sure. A lot will depend on Pedro starting. I think that could be a game changer for you. Look, early bench boosts aren't too bad, and then you can focus on taking money out of your bench and putting it into your starting 11. So I'm not completely against it. But because of my uncertainty about Pedro starting, I probably would hold off from that. And I know you want to use one of your free transfers instead of burning it, so that's completely understandable. But yeah, I'm looking at that team, and I mean, what would you really do? Pedro to Wissa? You might not even have the funds for that, to be fair, or even Alvarez. So that is a bit of a shame. Yeah, maybe Kabore to Gusto is a good transfer anyway, but I'm not so sure if I would bench boost. Diaz, Gvardiol, or Akanji? Akanji at the moment. It's between him and Gvardiol for me, and I would give Akanji the edge because of his versatility. Start Udogi or Malagusto? Gusto. Try not to spam the chat just in general because it does get in the way of other people who haven't had the questions answered, and I don't want to leave anyone unattended. Score predictions for tonight. I'll go over this as soon as the deadline is over. If not, I'll try to do it very quickly, fairly soon. Mbumo or Foden or Martinelli? This week, it would be Foden. Overall, Mbumo. Jackson, Alvarez or Wissa? My favourite at the moment is Wissa. To be quite frank, he is my favourite. I can understand your concerns. You might want to diversify your attack and also target Chelsea's great fixtures. They are second in terms of the FDR amongst all teams over the next 5 game weeks. I'd say it's between Wissa and Jackson still. Play 4 defenders with Saliba, Chilwell, Stupinian, Henry, or play 3 defenders with Jota. I would go for 4 defenders there, Twan. Pick for not looking the greatest, have a free transfer but don't know who to bring in. 4.5 million in the bank and already have Henry. If not, you could go for Sanchez there and target Chelsea's great fixtures. Yes, double up in Chelsea defensively isn't ideal, but with those fixtures, it's not a bad time to do so. Saliba or Gusto, Saliba, Mbumo, Foden, Martinelli, we've covered. Got 2 free transfers, Pedro to Jackson or Alvarez, and Bruno to Foden, or leave this and go for Gabriel to Saliba. I would do Pedro to Jackson, roll the other transfer, and then in Game Week 4, you can do Bruno out to Foden or Mbumo. So that would be my advice. Gabriel to Saliba is not a bad transfer if you really want to use both of them. Is Enciso injured? Yes. He's potentially out for 1 to 3 months, it looks like. Let's keep an eye out for further updates. Thoughts on Shaw to Gvardiol and Pedro to Alvarez from Man City triple up? I'm all for it. That's simple as that. Really good transfers. I'm struggling so much. Bench 2. I would bench Pedro. And it is a bit tricky because I think he'll start, but there is still a doubt in my mind about that. So Joao Pedro bench and potentially Saliba. Milner says, got Turner, Henry, Archer and Bayer on the bench with 1.4 million in the bank. Do you think I save the cash or straighten the bench? Maybe a defender in for Bayer. If you've got 2 free transfers, Milner, and you don't want to burn it, upgrading Bayer is fine, and bolstering your bench, I think that's a good move. But otherwise, if you've got 1 free transfer, I'd probably roll. If you've got a really good starting 11 which you're happy with, just roll. Is Luis Diaz a good option instead of Salah? Yes. Martinelli or Foden? I still prefer Martinelli overall, and I wouldn't sell him this week. Bench 1, Akanji, Gabriel, Stupinian, Chilwell. Gabriel. Sell Martinelli to Mbumo in Game Week 4, not this week. Thank you, Lager, for moderating the chat. I appreciate it. -4 to replace Pickford to Onana. I don't like hits for goalkeepers. Now, I think United will keep a clean sheet, but even that's not a certainty. And based on what's happened so far this season, I think most people would give Forest the goal in that game. So I personally wouldn't take a -4 for that move. But would I make the transfer for free? Yes. So maybe you have to wait another week for it, in my opinion. Rashford to Son or Maddison? Maddison, if I had to pick. Is -4 from Boomer worth it? Who are you selling, though? That would be the question. I think ultimately it will be worth it, but if you're doing something like Rashford out for Mbumo for a -4, I genuinely think Rashford outscores him this week, and you might be kicking yourself. It's all about timing. Hey Dylan, any news on the Chelsea lineup? Not, as far as I'm aware, no. Maddison or Pedro? Maddison. Best 4 million defender. Probably Gusto at the moment. Not a long-term thing, though, once Reece James comes back. And 4-point family midfielder. Tricky one. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but I'm not really a big fan of the 4-point family midfielders. I'll have a quick look now just to refresh my memory. I mean, people will say Pape Sarr after his performance in Gameweek 2, but trust me, he's not going to score like that week in, week out. But he'd be one of the standouts, I guess, because he could get plenty of starts as a 4-point family midfielder for Spurs. But yeah, really, I'm looking at this list. It's not looking great. We're all pointing towards the Newcastle midfielder, who's impressing a lot in pre-season. Hasn't really materialized so far. Anderson. Yeah, if you want a 4-point family midfielder, it's probably Sarr or Nakamba simply because of appearance points, but don't expect too much in terms of goal contributions, in my opinion. Eze to someone for a hit or bench Eze for a doggy? Well, honestly, I'd probably keep things as they are, so not sure if I'd do Eze out for a hit unless you're going to a Foden or something like that. In that case, fair enough, I'd probably go ahead with it. Mbeumo Akanji or Mbeumo and Wissa? To start, probably Mbeumo and Akanji, dare I say. Would you sell Salah to Foden? Yes. And Pedro to Jackson? Also yes. Particularly the Pedro to Jackson move. So if Enciso out, Pedro should be nailed, no? Not necessarily, because De Zerbi said Ferguson will start tomorrow. Now I think Pedro will start as an attacking midfielder, just behind Ferguson, and the wingers will be Matoma and March. But that still isn't a guarantee, and there is still the odd chance that Pedro is benched. But, you know, as I've said before to people, I personally think Pedro will start, but I'm not confident enough for me to say he's a definite hold or that he's a great option in the long term. Porro or Romero? Porro for the attacking threat. What do you think of Mubama? Just a 4-point family and forward, really. I think Archer will be the best one now. Osula is still fairly decent. And yeah, Mubama will get some appearance points, and you never know, he could get some goals off the bench from time to time. But yeah, there's not really much to talk about there. You can't rely on him in your FPL team. Thank you, Medicat. I appreciate it. I try my best. I do sometimes go more in depth, as I'm doing now. Maybe I'll just move on. Start 3 of Luis Diaz, Cash, Udogi, João Pedro. I would start João Pedro, Luis Diaz, and probably Cash. Yeah, I'd bench Udogi. Start Pinnacle, Gabriel. Bench Martinelli or Jackson. Honestly, benching either of them this week with their fixture is really tricky. If I had to pick one, I'd actually bench Jackson. Sounds really crazy, but just my personal opinion. I brought in Diaz. I have Jota and Diaz. Hold them. I would probably trim down with the fixtures in mind. I think selling either Jota or Diaz, and right now I'd rather keep Diaz. So let's say Jota to Mbeumo is a great long-term move. Estupinian or Gabriel start 1? Estupinian. I would maybe consider starting Gabriel over a Chelsea defender there, a wide ball, but just something to consider. When to sell Rashford? Gameweek 4. I have 2 free transfers to sell Gabriel or Bulldog or 4-point family and forward. I'd rather sell Bulldog, and in terms of 4-point family and forward, not really worth it unless you really don't want to burn a transfer. That's basically the only time you want to change your 4-point family and forward. So in my case, it'd be Osula to Archer. Yeah, I think Bulldog is the one to upgrade there. And of course, Gabriel, 4.5 million. He's maybe now 4.9 million, is about to go down to that price. It's not ideal to have a defender who was supposed to be nailed, not really delivering, but I personally believe he will get back into the side. Yeah, Gabriel to Akanji. I like that move. I'd do it. Bench Udogi or Cash? Udogi. Start Pinnock or Gabriel? Gabriel. Sterling captain, really good outside shout. I mentioned him earlier. I personally have, some other preferences, but in terms of differential captains, he's right up there. You think Lewis Hall could play midfield for Newcastle? Yes. He was one of Chelsea's best players last season. Quite surprising to see him go, but Chelsea had to get some players off the books. Yeah, I think he could, but I'm not so sure if he's a FPL option at the moment. Maybe in the years to come. Hi Dylan, should I transfer in Sterling for Martinelli or Jackson in for Pedro? I would do Jackson in for Pedro there. I've got Alvarez, Haaland and Pedro up front. Yeah, tricky one because You've already got Alvarez, and you might enter this dilemma of 8 attackers, 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards, and you have to bench someone every week. Thank you, Soldier Boy. I appreciate the kind words. Maddison or Foden for Salah? I would say Maddison, and I do want to say him, but not just because of his injury now. Sorry, and his flag, and the concern of him starting in Game Week 3. But in general, I think Maddison's more of an injury-prone player. At the moment, I'd probably go for Foden. Just about though, really close call. Maddison or Gabriel? Maddison. Haaland, Alvarez, and Foden. Remove one from your starting 11. Probably Alvarez, which sounds crazy. What would happen with Man United midfielders if Bruno and Rashford haul massively this week? Doesn't change my opinions too much. I'm still looking to sell at least one of them. But let's say, for example, Bruno produces a massive haul and Rashford blanks. In that case, I might sell Rashford instead and keep Bruno. But apart from that, the plan will be to sell one of them at the very least. Best midfielder, all values except Saka, Mbeumo, Rashford, Matoma to bring in this week, not Salah. Probably Foden. My wildcard team says same. Flecken, Chilwell, Stupinian, Dean, Saka, Foden, and Mbeumo, March. Captain. Matoma, Jackson, Haaland, bench, Leno, Udogi, Trippier, Semenyo. Yeah, that's another one, actually. I forgot about 4-point family and forwards. Apart from Archer, I think Semenyo is the standout at the moment, so good shout. Yeah, so I personally prefer, for example, instead of Udogi, I prefer some other defenders in that position. But you've got things really, really well sorted. I would maybe go for either an Arsenal or Man City defender there instead of Luka Dean. And as for midfielders, I mean, don't really have any problems with the midfield. Looks really good. Yeah, I'd probably just change Luka Dean and maybe Leno and Udogi. The rest looks great. Even Trippier could be a really good option, and that is just a move to be ahead of the curve. So I do understand that one, and I'm not completely against it. That Air says, sure replacement. 1, play Udogi and bring in Botman for Game Week 5 onwards. 2, bring in Henry and bench Udogi. Great question. I personally would go for 2, but option 1 isn't bad at all. Gabriel Maddison covered. Start Ezzy or Pedro. I would go for Pedro. Will Salah start? Yes, no doubt about it for me. Start Maddison or Doggy. We have got some repeat questions. I will go for some of them again because I do realize sometimes people maybe aren't listening in that moment or whatever. But I would go for Maddison. Triple Capitán, Haaland o contra qué rival? No, para mí es mejor esperar para una doble fecha. Pero mira, esta semana puede ser que Haaland anota 2 o 3 goles, es seguro. Pero creo que va a haber otras oportunidades para usar el triple capitán. Howell or Maddison? Maddison. Have 2 free transfers, don't want to burn a transfer. Bulldog to Gusto. Yeah, I think that's a good move. Captain. Haaland, unfortunately, I think he'll score the most points. Ariel or Turner, start 1. Turner. Best goalkeeper, 4.5 to 5 million. For me, it's still Onana, but really close. He's not as good maybe as I thought, but he's still a good option. He will get saves and bonus points, which is the main thing. Is it okay to replace Saka for Odegaard? No. I mean, you're on a wild card, so, fair enough, but I still think Saka's better. I already have Alvarez and Haaland. Should I buy Foden or Jackson to go with them? I prefer Foden over Jackson at the moment, so that's where I would go. Start Eze or Gabriel. I'd go for Gabriel. Then I have a free transfer to burn. Bulldog to Gusto or any other 4 million defender. Yeah, Gusto's the one to go for right now. Bjornar says, I'm using the free hit this week. My team is Edison, Estupinian, Saliba, Chilwell, Rashford, Foden, Odegaard, Saka, Matoma, Jackson, and Haaland captain. Do you think there is anything better for a free hit team? It's a really good squad. I agree with the general concept of it, the teams you're loading up on. I could maybe say, instead of Odegaard, Martinelli or something like that. But looks really good. There's not much to really nitpick there. There's always going to be 50-50 calls that can go your way or go completely against you. But overall, I think that's a solid squad. And I wouldn't change much, if anything. Colwill or Maddison? Maddison, Jackson, Alvarez, or Joao Pedro? Jackson at the moment. I already have Alvarez and Haaland. We have covered that. Ruben Dias or Romero? Ruben Dias. Watkins or Jackson? I prefer Watkins still. Who to start? Richarlison or Doggy? Gusto? Richarlison, but I'm not a big fan of him. be quite frank. Who is the most nailed City defender? It's literally open Pandora's box. It's such a difficult question to answer, but I would go for Akanji or Gavadio. Start Alvarez or Ferguson? Great question. With Ferguson set to start tomorrow, that's confirmed by the manager. I think I'd go Ferguson. Yeah, sorry. Any spam questions, especially when we answer them, they will be timed out. So be sure not to spam the chat there. Best long-term goalkeeper, Onana or Flecken for me. Foden or Maddison? Foden, but just about. Joao Pedro or Botman? Joao Pedro. I would go for Gabriel there, the OP. Thoughts on Triple Man City? Foden and Alvarez will be the big concerns in terms of rotation and minutes, and they certainly will come when the Champions League arises in the next month or so, and also when the Carabao Cup comes into play. But, you know, for a short-term thing, I do like the triple up. It's just, I personally would rather go for one City defender and then maybe double attack. Should I risk it and captain a doggy? No chance for me, I'm sorry. I think Spurs could concede. I'm backing Bournemouth to score, and I just don't see him getting 2 assists and a goal. I think Odogie's a quality talent. He's got a lot of potential, but I would never captain him. I'm sorry. Just me, by the way. Play the game the way you want to. If he ends up doing what you say, then just enjoy the points, really. But I just don't see it happening. Start Gavadio or Henry? Gavadio. I've just done Rashford to Foden, thinking of doing Pedro to Wissa for 2 free transfers. Thoughts, please? Yeah, I think they're good moves in the long term. I think Rashford to Foden will come back to bite you this week, but overall, good move. I have Colwell. Question, sell Gabriel and buy Chilwell, or just keep free transfer for next week? I'd buy Chilwell this week, to be fair. I prefer Watkins there, the land talk. Also confirmed Jackson starts. Thank you for that. I'll try have a look for any leaked team news that we may have. It looks like we may have it. If you have seen it, then be sure to put the link in the chat so I can have a look. That would be greatly appreciated. Rico Henry. I'm not starting him, but I do like him as an option. And going into Gameweek 4, he has a very good chance of getting into my starting 11 finally. Zekno says Stones out for Gavadio, or Stones and Gabriel out for Diaz and Gusto Henry, or other defender under 4.7 million. I think Stones out for Gavadio is just fine, and you can always, you know, bolster the rest of your defense in Gameweek 4. Richarlison to Foden or Mbeumo? Richarlison to Mbeumo. Start Gabriel or Gusto? Gabriel. Short to Rico Henry, good move, I like it, but if you don't have these options already, I would recommend them over Rico Henry, and they include Chilwell, Saliba, one of Gavadio or Akanji, and even Estupinian, of course. Thank you, Talib, I appreciate it. Foden or Chilwell? Chilwell. Jota to Foden, Maddison to Foden, or bench Maddison and upgrade 4.5 million to Alvarez. I would just rather do Jota to Foden, I think. Jackson, Alvarez, or Joao Pedro? You've asked us already. I'll answer again. I'll go for Jackson. Jackson or Alvarez? Jackson. Start Gabriel or Henry? I would go for Gabriel. Yeah, Keenan, hopefully you got the answer just before. Ruben Diaz or Romero? Ruben Diaz. Is it worth holding on to Gabriel? If not, then who should be the best replacement? I think it's still worth it because I personally think he'll get back into the side and start most weeks. But in terms of selling him, you know, there are certain players who I think it's still worth going for it. Saliba, Chilwell, who you already have, Estupinian as well. And the other would be a Man City defender like a Kanji. So yeah, Gabriel to Saliba or a City defender is worth it for me. Apart from that, I'd be inclined to keep Gabriel. I don't think Varane is necessarily a good choice. If you want a United defensive asset, Onana's the way to go. Is Joao Pedro and Shaw to Jackson and Gavadio a good move? Yes, definitely. I would bench Joao Pedro there, Roku, but really close call. And I personally back Pedro to start. I have Watkins. Should I replace him with Jackson? No, not for me. Honestly, Zaren's never, I'm sorry, but never have Salah versus Cunha for a debate. I know Cunha's got a better fixture. And look, I could be wrong, but always start Salah for me in those sorts of situations. Look, Mohammed, I can understand the reasoning behind your pick, but I personally don't think so. I think Van de Ven won't get as many clean sheets. I mean, look, if Gabriel's benched yet again, you'll be laughing, and Van de Ven's got some great fixtures, but I still think Gabriel's a better option than Van de Ven. What do I think of Gabriel? I would keep him in most circumstances, but if you're going to Chilwell, Gabriel, a Man City defender, sorry, not Gabriel, Saliba, then I would sell him. But that's the only sorts of things I would do. Thank you, Adil. I am considering changing the name. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. Just to boost in the algorithm. You know, people are already searching FPL and stuff like that, so it does help in terms of views, subscribers, and traction and growth. So I am considering that. Gvardiol Diaz, I'd go for Gvardiol simply because he's cheaper and I think he'll be just as nailed. I could be wrong. Worth starting Pau over Estupinian? No, not for me, because Estupinian has got way more goal and assist threat, bonus points as well, and I would also back Burnley to score. Alvarez or Jackson, I'd go for Jackson. Start Gabriel Henry, Gabriel, which Man City defender? For me, it's Akanji or Gvardiol. It's really close between those two. Fleck into Edison. Don't really see a need to do that move. Best under 5 million defender. Rico Henry's up there for me. So Rico Henry or Gabriel, if he is 4.9 million. Let me just double check that very quickly. Pretty sure he did go down. Yeah, I'd say Gabriel or Rico Henry. So yeah, that would be my answer. Even though you might disagree, which, fair enough. That's what it's all about. No funds to buy Chilwell to Gabriel unless Watkins to Jackson. Really good question. In that case, I would do it, but even then, selling Watkins, I'm not comfortable with it. I really am not. FPL Dylan says Lager, yeah, even without the underscore potentially, I am considering it. Unfortunately, I think the Twitter name is taken, so that's something I'd have to think about as well. Talk some goalkeepers, says Sabri. Well, we haven't got goalkeeper questions really. Well, actually, that's a lie. We have gotten them. We have covered some goalkeeper questions, but you know, we're going to try cover as many different things as possible. Matoma transfer to Mbeumo. Not this week. I'd do it next week. We have answered this already. I don't think Varane is necessarily a great long-term option. I'd rather go for Onana to cover United defensively. Varane's also very injury-prone, so I wouldn't go there. A Doggy or Gabriel? Gabriel. Mbeumo, March, or Matoma? Long-term Mbeumo, but this week, I think it's between the Brighton midfielders. I think they will outscore Mbeumo. But long-term Mbeumo, no doubt. Worth starting Gabriel over a Doggy? I think so. Shorter Henry or a Doggy? Henry. Diaby or Pedro? I would go for Pedro. Who to bench out of Colwill, Akanji, Saliba, and Estupinian? I would go for... I'd actually go for Colwill on the bench. Who to sell Shaw for? Yeah, so this has been a very popular question today, and we have covered it in depth. So once again, you know, for me, the best defenders in the game are Chilwell, Estupinian, Saliba, and one of Akanji / Gvardiol. So any of those players you don't have, great moves for you in the defense. Gusto, Pau, Saliba, and Estupinian start 3 and bench 1. So who do I bench? Probably Pau Torres. Play Henry or João Pedro? João Pedro. Should I replace Gabriel with Akanji and then replace Fernandes for Mbeumo or Foden? Just do Gabriel to Akanji. I think that's enough. I wouldn't sell Fernandes for a -4 hit. No way. Yeah, look, with Solly March, he's been really impressive so far. The reason why I didn't recommend him too much in Game Week 1 is because in pre-season he didn't play a lot. Also, towards the tail end of last season, he also was benched quite frequently. And with Matoma, you just know he's going to start the vast majority of games under the Zerbi. But March has been absolute quality. Surely there's no way he gets benched. And he's also the biggest goal threat at the moment for Brighton. So I like him. He's a good pick. I would just be a bit concerned about the fixtures, of course. But I mentioned that in the best wildcard video as well. I have Wissa, Pinnock, and Flecken. Who to take out for Mbeumo? Probably Pinnock. Probably Pinnock. Cash or João Pedro? João Pedro. Start Maddison or a Doggy? Maddison. Best time to use the wildcard? There's no specific time. It's all a team-dependent question. You know, the best time to wildcard for me might be different for you, but I tend to wildcard after Game Week 7. I'm going different captain this week. Alvarez or Foden or Saka or Jackson? Saka for me. Watkins to Jackson or Saka, Martinelli, Fernandes, Rashford to Foden? It would be Watkins to Jackson if I had to pick one. look, overall, I think Fernandes or Rashford to Foden is the best move, but not this week. No doubt about it. If you've got one free transfer, my advice is to keep what you have, and then in Game Week 4, sell Fernandes to Foden. 2 free transfers, Watkins to Jackson and Rashford to Foden. Honestly, I hate to be a party pooper, but I just don't like selling Watkins to Jackson this week, and the same goes for Rashford to Foden. I genuinely think Rashford will outscore Foden, and I think Watkins could keep up with Jackson. Yeah, wasting, but to be honest, I'm not trying to be rude. Like, even with, the highlight chat feature that I have as well, even with that, for example, people still ask the same question and they repeat and they repeat it. So it might solve a lot of the repeated questions, but not all of them, in my opinion. Gabriel to Saliba? Yes, I'd say so. Hi Dylan, start Colwell or Gabriel? Gabriel. Pedro to Wissa or Jackson? I actually prefer Wissa, so I'm going to go for him. Gabriel to Henry this week, or roll and start Gabriel and probably do the transfer next week? Yeah, I'd say do the transfer next week. I think Arsenal have a better chance of a clean sheet, and Gabriel scored in both games against Fulham last season. Sell Gabriel to a doggy or Botman? Honestly, I'd say neither. I'd keep Gabriel. If I had to pick one, it's Botman for the long term. But you'd bench him anyway against Liverpool. Gabriel to Saliba this week, yes. Set on upgrading goalkeeper, sell Turner or Pickford. Replace with? Sell Pickford because Turner's cheaper. He's just your backup 4 million option. Sell Pickford to Onana or Flecken, in my opinion. Sure, captain, not against it. I'm actually more for it than I am with Sterling, for example. And in terms of differential captaincy choices, they're right up there. Not my favourite because I think Haaland, Saka, Rashford, etc. are all better, but he's up there in the top 10 for sure. Maybe even top 5. Maybe Soldier Boy, but just be careful if you've got 8, attackers, 5 midfielders and 3 forwards. I've done Edouard to Wissa, looks fantastic. I think that's a great transfer. Can't do short to either Saliba or a Kanji. Then maybe what you could do is wait for next week or the week after to make such a move. We are 90 minutes away from the deadline, so make sure to lock in your teams as soon as possible. I wouldn't expect a site crash, but you never know. The deadline is at 6:30, so just 18 minutes left, and we have covered a lot of questions today. And if I've helped you in any way or you're enjoying the stream, then be sure to like the video. Also subscribe to the channel. We have hit 19,000 subscribers today, and the next aim obviously will be 20k. We're already making some strides to that already, but I have a feeling with UCL Fantasy on the way as well, the growth will be a bit quicker, but we are trying to find new ways to grow the channel and become even better. Fair enough, Jason. I wouldn't mind that necessarily. I think most people will go for it, and his effective ownership will be ridiculous. But I think Man City will win by 2 or 3. I'm predicting 2 or 3-0 Man City, and as a result, I think Haaland will be involved. I was asked earlier about predictions, so I'm going to go through them very quickly before going back to your questions. Chelsea versus Luton Town. I'm actually quite mixed about this. I think Luton Town could sneak a goal on maybe in the counter-attack, but more so on a set piece, which Chelsea seem a bit suspect with. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Chelsea win. I'm not that confident of Chelsea in general, but I'm going to go for a win here. Bournemouth against Spurs. I think both teams will score. It's going to be a bit of a close game. You know what? I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between Bournemouth and Spurs. Arsenal against Fulham. Always tricky when you predict on your own team. I'm going to go for 3-1 Arsenal. Brentford against Crystal Palace, I think, will be low scoring. This could be another draw as well. But I'm actually going to go for a Brentford win, 1-0. Everton against Wolves, once again, this could be 0-0, 1-1, 1-0 either side. I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 here. And you know what? I'm actually going to go for 2-2 in the Bournemouth Spurs game. And that's actually the one I'm most conflicted about, because it's either 2-1 Spurs or 2-2. So I'm going to leave that for now. So Everton Wolves, I'm going to go for 1-1. Man United against Forest, 2-0 Man United. Brighton against West Ham, I'm also going to go for... You know what? I think I'm going to go for a 3-1 Brighton as well. Burnley against Aston Villa, I'm going to go for a 2-1 Aston Villa. 3-0 Man City against Sheffield United. And Newcastle Liverpool, really tough game. Liverpool beat them both times last season, but I think it will be... I think I'm going to give Newcastle the edge here. I'm going to give them a 2-1 victory, but really, really close call. Yeah, that game and the Spurs one, the ones I'm least confident about in terms of predictions. You know what? I'm going to change the Newcastle-Liverpool one to a draw and give Spurs the win 2-1, but wouldn't surprise me at all if Bournemouth got a result there. So let's wait and see. All right, so thank you very much. We have hit over 150 likes and we have almost 200 viewers. Might be a bit of an ask, but the next aim would be to get to 200 likes by the end of the stream, and that'd be massively appreciated. And thank you to those that have sent in a super chat today. All the channel members and patrons, you are greatly appreciated, to say the least. Will Bruno outscore and Boomer this game week? I think so. Pedro to Wissa, yep, good move long term. Everyone can make predictions in our Discord as well. Yeah, in the Discord server, we have new channels, and we also have linked the bot. Huge shout out to Wasting for setting that up. So be sure to join the Discord server, and all the links in the description below for the Twitter, Instagram, and the Patreon and channel memberships. And there's also Drafthound, which I haven't shown you so far, but I will give you a sneak peek very, very soon. Risk and play Gabriel. If not, who's the best replacement? I'd risk it and play him, but if not, Chilwell, Saliba, Akanji / Gvardiol, and Estupinian are by far the best defenders in the game at the moment. In order to bring in Chilwell for sure, I need to take out Martinelli, Saka, Bruno, or Rashford for Foden. Well, it would be Bruno out to Foden. I think that's the best move. Thoughts on Son? Just not worth it at 9 million. I'd rather go for Maddison for the Spurs midfield. James to Akanji and Eze to Matoma. Yeah, I like those moves. Not much really to complain about. If you don't have Mbeumo, though, I would go for him. Mohammed, you have asked this question before. I have answered it. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. What would Free City players be an Eze? And Eze then sign for City? Oh, what would happen? Well, you would have those 4 players, but the next time you make a transfer, you would be forced to sell one of those City players. But that's a good question. We don't get that too often, but that's the way it would work, Woody. Chilwell and Wissa, Augusto and Jackson / Alvarez. Chilwell and Wissa. Yeah, I think that's a really good duo. Best Shaw replacements: Chilwell, Saliba, Akanji, Estupinian. Any one of those 4 that you don't have. How does Shaw's absence affect Bruno and Rashford's chances of returning? Honestly, that's a good question. I think Shaw does provide a bit of creativity on the left. The thing is with United, they have no natural left back now, with Malacia also out injured. So they might have to improvise. Maybe Lisandro Martinez as a left back, which Arteta wanted to sign him for at Arsenal. But I think there will be a loss of creativity on the left-hand side. And also the loss of Mount, who is injured at the moment. That could maybe play into Bruno's hands, with Eriksen playing just behind him, with Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes playing further forward. But I don't understand why in certain away games Bruno Fernandes plays on the wing. It really is I think it's just a complete mismanagement of his quality, and he is one of the biggest creators in the league. Mbeumo or Foden Martinelli? Yeah, same thing. Matoma or Sterling for Wildcard. Still Matoma for me, but Sterling, great fixtures, really good differential too. Well, the reason why Rodrigo is because the fixtures aren't great. He's 12.5 million, and by selling him, you have so many different avenues, like getting Chilwell in the defense, also getting a 5-man midfield, getting midfielders like Mbeumo, who are outscoring him quite significantly at the moment for half the price. Now, by the end of the season, I still expect Salah to be in the top 3 for most points scored, but are you going to captain him? If the answer is no, then it doesn't really feel worth it to have Salah in your team. Yeah, Wan-Bissaka can play against Forest, that is true. There is a possibility of that. Son captain for differential. It's up to you how you play the game, and I think Son could score. I see a high-scoring game there, but I personally wouldn't captain him because you see his form in pre-season. Hasn't really done anything in the first 2 game weeks, and also last season a huge drop off from what he did beforehand. So I personally would say no. Rashford and Pedro or Jackson and Sterling. This week it would be Rashford and Pedro, but long term Jackson and Sterling definitely a better duo. Shaw replacement: Diaz, Udogie or Gvardiol. Akanji to Gabriel or Jackson to Watkins. I'm guessing it's the other way around, because surely wouldn't be bringing in Gabriel with the benchings, but yeah, probably Gabriel to Akanji. Bring Sterling for Martinelli? No, not for me. Not to put others off, but thinking of no bench boost now based on the Zerbi's implied comments on Pedro, perhaps suggesting he won't start. Yeah, I didn't see his particular comments on João Pedro, but I did see what he said about Ferguson starting this weekend. That is confirmed. And I still think João Pedro could start behind him, but maybe if the Zerbi wasn't very favourable in the press conference, that could be a bit of a worry. Yeah, so we can't say for sure, but just to give context, Ferguson will play down the middle against West Ham, and then it's a question of will João Pedro play behind him like he did in Game Week 1 when Welbeck was leading the line? That's going to be the big question. Anyone doing more than -8 points, says Fingon. Wow. Hello, is it worth taking a -4 by taking in Jackson and removing Watkins? Not for me. Start Watkins or João Pedro? Watkins. Gabriel, Tarico, Henry, or Akanji Gavadio? I'd go for a Man City defender. Close to separate those two. Akanji might be the best one, but it's so close. Yeah, Douglas Luiz on pens, but I still wouldn't really recommend him, to be fair. I tend to recommend going for a strong midfield this year, the way the prices have been. I think that's the best team structure, so yeah, I wouldn't go for Douglas Luiz, but he's not a bad option. He's decent from long range. He's on penalties. Bit of a yellow card magnet, but not the worst option in the world. I just wouldn't go for him necessarily. I wouldn't go out my way to buy him. Yep, unknown. I think Wiss is a great option. Why don't you have a Man City defender? I've only got one free transfer. I'm happy with my team, and if I were to bring a Man City defender in, I would have to bench one of Saliba, Chilwell, Estupinian, or one of my attackers. I just don't really think it's worth it. So I will be looking at Man City defenders. I've recommended them all week, but you just can't have everyone. Yep, Ferguson is starting, at least, unless De Zerbi's a liar. You wouldn't think so. Chilwell, Jackson, and Sterling start. Yep, I think Lazy FPL are the ones who have some leaks. They've got some inside information. I will have a look just to confirm it for myself, but I would trust them. They have gotten things right, such as the Man City news in Game Week 1. So let me just have a look here. We've got 9 minutes left for the deadline, so be sure to keep on liking the video and also subscribe to the channel as we're looking to push on towards 20,000 subscribers. So yeah, Chilwell starts, Jackson starts, and so does Sterling. So great news for those tripling up on Chelsea. I've got Chilwell myself. Of course, if I was wildcarding, I'd potentially look at Jackson, but selling Watkins to Jackson, especially for a hit this week, I just can't bring myself to do it. Adnan, Ferguson is definitely starting. The Zerbi said he's starting, so there's no doubt about that. The thing with Pedro is he can still start, but it would be behind him as an attacking midfielder / second striker. Should I sell Gabriel, and if so, for who? The options to sell him to are Chilwell, Saliba, Gavadio / Akanji, and Estupinian. Apart from that, I'd be fairly inclined to keep. Roberto De Zerbi was asked by a journalist about João Pedro and Ferguson, as fans were excited by both, and he only mentioned Ferguson to say he'll start. Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, so that's why watching the conferences sometimes do give you a better, understanding of what the manager is saying, because sometimes, just a cold quote out of context might not give you the full picture. So that could be a really good shout, Marco. Maybe on the side we are looking too much into it, but that could be a thing to monitor. Thank you for that. Kupsi Kups says, hey Dylan, start Diaz over Estupinian or Saliba. It would be over Saliba. I would start Estupinian and Diaz. I mean, look, Bailey, he's a talented player. He's got a lot of potential, but I wouldn't be that keen on him just because he scored 14 points against Everton. I still think Diaby's better. Salah and Wissa or Bruno and Jackson and Money in the Bank? This week, Bruno and Jackson's better, but I would still sell Bruno in the long term. In Boomer for Maddison, yeah. Just bear in mind, Maddison could start this weekend. We have covered this already, Postacoglu's comments. So I think this week, if Maddison starts, he'll outscore Mbumo. But long term, there's no doubt that Mbumo is probably the best midfielder in the game at the moment. Do some of us still have the motto of always captain Haaland? Well, the way I'm looking at it is whenever Haaland's at home, I'll probably captain him. And in any away fixture versus a weaker side, I'm also going to captain him. So that's my policy. And unless there's a really strong alternative like Saka at home to Fulham or Rashford at home to Forest, yeah, it's just going to be Captain Haaland for the time being. But not always, I'd say. Start Watkins or João Pedro. Watkins, thoughts on starting Arsenal defenders. I think it will be White, Saliba, Gabriel, and probably Zinchenko. But that's not a guarantee. I think Zinchenko's the one I'm least confident about. Eze or Matoma out for Mbuma next week? Probably Eze. I'd rather keep Matoma there. No worries, Diogo. Salah and Whistle, Bruno and Jackson. Oh yeah, so we covered that. So if you got it. Best replacement for Pickford, Onana or Flecken. Update on Maddison availability. He trained today. He's also available as things stand, according to Postecoglou, but that doesn't mean he's definitely going to start. So take that with a pinch of salt. I think he'll personally start. It looks really good. But yeah, he still has a bit of a... He took a bit of a knock, basically, in the last game, and that's why they've been careful with him, but it looks good at the moment. Didn't train yesterday, trained today. It's looking good. Thoughts on starting Arsenal defenders? Start Gavadio against Sheffield United or Estupinian against West Ham. I'd still go for Estupinian for the attacking threat. Hey Dylan, Gabriel to Henry, Saliba or Doggy? I would go for Saliba. Yeah, I'd go for that, mate. Foden and Udogie or Jackson and Gusto? Great question. I'd go for Foden and Udogie. Colwell or Gavadio? I have a Kanji. I'd still go for Gavadio, I think, to be fair. Start Henry or Gusto? I would go for Henry. Bench 1, Foden, Diaby, Martinelli, Richarlison. I'd be very tempted to say bench Richarlison. It's between Diaby and Richarlison to bench. Definitely start Foden and Martinelli, in my opinion. I would probably bench Richarlison. 2 free transfers and I have no moves to make. Should I do Watkins to Jackson or Bulldog to Gusto? Probably Bulldog to Gusto. Should I start Pedro because Enciso is injured? That doesn't mean he's a guaranteed starter because Brighton could still do something like Buonanotte starting, or they could play... They've got so many different options as well. I personally think Pedro will still start despite the concerns. You know, Ferguson up front, Pedro attacking midfielder, but it's not a guarantee that he's going to start. Let's just put it that way. Should I start Gavadio or Estupinian? Estupinian for me. Would you bench boost with Saliba, Alvarez, Colwell, Turner? I mean, that is a good bench, but I'm just wondering what your starting 11 is. If your starting 11 also is really solid, then yeah, I'd be open to bench boosting that. Any news on Gusto starting? No, not as far as I'm aware. I'll have a look for you. So yeah, all we've gotten is Sterling, Chilwell, and Jackson start. So that's confirmed by the FPL newsletter, which I also would recommend. I'm subscribed to them currently. And the emails, really, really good mailing service. And it's kind of a good way of summarizing everything you need to know in a matter of 4 to 5 minutes. Bench Martinelli or Gabriel? I would bench Gabriel. Start Henry or Gabriel? I'd start Gabriel. Mbeumo or Foden? Mbeumo long term, so that's my answer. Would you sell Pickford to buy Edison or Sanchez for -4? No, but I would ultimately sell him. I'd just do it for free though. What's the... Oh yeah, let's see if I can... Yeah, no leaks so far, apart from the ones I just said. Looks very favourable for Jackson, Sterling and Chilwell. They're all expected to start. I mean, Ashraf, if you've got both Jackson and Sterling, I mean, I'm guessing... I'm not sure what you're saying exactly here, but yeah. If you've got both, don't ask me if you're going to bench one of them. It just makes no sense to buy them and then bench one when they're facing Luton Town at home. Mbeumo price rising tonight. Thoughts on buying him now for Eze and bench him? Yeah, I think that's a solid plan. And look, you don't even need to do it for this game specifically. You can wait for the deadline to pass and then straight after make the move. Henry or Gabriel? Gabriel. Martinelli or Mbeumo this week? Martinelli. Salah, Rashford, Odegaard, Martinelli or Watkins captain for my second team without Haaland? It would be... probably Rashford, actually. Look, I'm not trying to be rude, but look, questions like this, we literally featured it on screen. I've answered it 3 or 4 times. I honestly don't know what else to do. So I'll just leave it at that, basically. Start Henry or Udogie? Henry. Play Udogie or Gabriel? Gabriel. I would bench Gabriel and start Martinelli there, Mecca. Yeah, same thing. Should I go for Pedro to Jackson, Watkins for -4? Probably, yeah. I'd go to Jackson for the fixtures. Start Pedro or Martinelli? Martinelli. Sell Watkins for Jackson? I wouldn't. I'd wait another week at least. Sell Gabriel? Yes, but only to a select few, like Saliba, Estupinian, Chilwell, and a Man City defender. Same says Sanchez, Henry, Saliba. What's a good bench boost? It is a good bench boost. Play Udogie or Gabriel? Gabriel. Yeah, we are pretty much about to enter the deadline. There's literally 30 seconds left. Sterling or Jackson on the wild card? Jackson. Captain Mbeumo or Haaland? Haaland. I wouldn't captain Mbeumo this week. I actually think it will be a lower scoring game than we're accustomed to from Brentford at the moment. I would buy Jackson. Gusto starting. That's not confirmed yet. I'll keep an eye out for you. Why Gabriel over Henry this week? Because I think Gabriel will start and he's got more attacking threat in terms of goals scored. And I also think Arsenal have a better chance of a clean sheet. In that way, if Mbeumo injured, is the transfers are wasted. Yeah, that's true, Wei-Seng, that's true. But it's just another suggestion, basically. Do I get rid of Bruno in Game Week 4? Not now. Bench Gavardiol or Gabriel? Gabriel. I just did short to Henry. Yeah, that's a good move. Make your moves, exactly, Sync, because we are now... well, the deadline's passed, so you can't do anything more now. Walker or Romero? Walker. Onana, Kanji, Chilwell, Stupinian, Saka, Bruno, Rashford, Martinelli, and Mbeumo, Jackson, Haaland, and have to bench Gabriel. Yeah, I don't really disagree with that. I would have done the same thing. We are locked. Thank you, Awali. Thank you, Sidindra. I ended up... oh, let's see. Decided to sell Pickford to Edison and save the other transfer. Good luck, Dylan and everyone. Likewise, Sidindra. Looking good. Adil says, I ended up doing Watkins to Jackson just because he's home and surely he'll get his goal soon. And then I don't have to worry about doing Watkins to Jackson next week and use my 2 free transfers elsewhere. Fair enough. You know, play it your way, of course. I only give my own opinions. I just really rate Watkins' chances of scoring. But Jackson has the better fixture. I think that's quite clear. Thank you to the Parky and Adash. What about I accept the price rise and wait for next week to decide to buy Mbeumo or not? Well, you could do that because either way, I think you can still easily afford him. That shouldn't be an issue. It's been a blast talking to you for the past 2 hours or so. I mean, these streams always go so quickly, so it's always a pleasure to do them and to, you know, just engage here in the chat. We do have 172 likes, so on your way out, be sure to smash the like button. Let's try to get this to 200. That'd be greatly appreciated on a day where we hit 19,000 subscribers, and we're looking to get to the next milestone, which is 20,000 as well. In future streams, I'll be covering different sites as well, such as Drafthound. Be sure to check the link in the description below, as well as the Discord server, the patrons, and also the Twitter, Instagram. I'm also considering a change of channel name potentially, and I've got a poll out on my channel. Be sure to vote there and let me know your thoughts. But it's just to kind of boost up in the algorithm and to help us grow even more. Marcus has painfully bought in Gusto for Cabore and kept him. Pedro and a doggy on the bench. No bench boost. Just couldn't bring myself to do it so early. Plus Pedro down. Yeah, look, it could always backfire either way if Pedro starts and does extremely well, but I think ultimately it is the right decision to not bench boost, so don't kick yourself no matter what happens. Let's just wait and see, though. I mean, it's always a tricky one with the bench boost. And either way, if you didn't get 15 points, you know, let's say you get 5 to 10 points on the bench boost, you know, on your bench this week, it's not that great, and I think you could easily outscore that later in the season. Thank you, Awali. I appreciate that very much. And Mohammed says, Akanji to Gabriel and Foden to Martinelli. Yeah, good transfers. I think Martinelli could do really well this week, and same with Gabriel, but I think long-term, Gabriel to Akanji could be the way to go. Change captain from Haaland to Saka last minute. Honestly, I hope Saka gets more points and you do really well there, so good luck. Thank you, Arnav, as well. Best of luck to everyone watching too. Mohammed says, Onana to Sanchez next game week. I still think Onana's a better goalkeeping option, and I expect Man United to keep more clean sheets than Chelsea this season. Thank you very much to everyone for watching. Like I said, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, share this around with those that love FPL and UCL Fantasy. The plan is to do a UCL Fantasy first draft / preliminary draft video where I talk about the team I've made before the draw has been made, which is next week. I think on the 31st of August, that's when the draw is made. I'm now going to be heading off. We have done predictions earlier and covered many different sites, but next time I'll try to cover Drafthound and a few other things that we didn't touch upon in this video. Be sure to take care, enjoy the football, check all the links in the description below for the Discord server. I'd highly encourage you to join there. The community there is incredible. And also the Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, where we're looking to reach new milestones. On Twitter, I believe we're very close to 2,000 followers. And of course on YouTube, the next big goal is 20,000. And now I'm head off to celebrate my mom's birthday. So it's a great occasion. I'm going to be enjoying myself. Hopefully you do too. And I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 3. I'll see you very soon. If you've got any other queries, leave them in the comment section down below. Take care.